Hello everyone and welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Happy Thursday. Excited to be back at it with yet another video. And in this episode, we're going to be talking all things about this upcoming nodal change. We're going to see the North Node moving into Aquarius and the South Node moving into the sign of Leo. We are going to do a deep dive today. We're going to talk about how this is one of the bigger collective transits for the better part of the next 2 years as we see the nodes changing signs. So if you're new here, please make sure you guys click the bell button below and subscribe to the channel. Hype this video, share it on your socials. If it helps you, definitely give me a thumbs up and drop me a comment below. Let me know your rising sign and how you guys are feeling with this incoming change taking place this next week. I do read all of the comments. It also really helps any interaction with the channel grows. So I appreciate you guys so much. And on July 26, 2026, in just a few short days, we're going to see the lunar nodes change signs for the very first time in a year and a half. Now, this is not a small shift. The North Node is now leaving Pisces and it's going to be dropping into Aquarius, while the South Node is going to be leaving the sign of Virgo and it's going to be moving into Leo. So that means that this is actually going to be the beginning of an 18-month evolutionary story for everybody collectively. And this is one that carries some serious historical kind of echoes. So if you stick around for this video, hopefully by the end, you guys will be able to know exactly what this means for you, your rising sign, how to work with it, and we're going to do a little bit of reflecting on what has happened in the past and how the entire world changed during these particular cycles. Now, a little bit of a brief kind of overview. Basically, the short version is on the 26th, we're going to see that this particular shift is going to be happening. And if you guys look at the chart, you see these little horseshoes. These are the North and the South Node that are going to be moving into these signs. Now with the North Node moving into Aquarius and the South Node moving into Leo, they're actually going to be staying there until March 26, 2028. So it's about like an 19-month cycle. And that means that this week we are closing out the Pisces kind of Virgo nodal story of surrender, service, boundaries, and we're opening up to a brand new chapter about the ego versus community. Now, this is also going to be bringing up topics like visibility versus belonging, personal glory versus collective progress, and we're definitely going to be covering what the nodes actually are, what the specific transit means, and when the last time this happened, what the world looked like, and some of the major kind of outer planet patterns that I'm going to be taking a look at, and some of the transits that really catch my eye over the better part of the next month and a half. Year and a half. So we're going to be looking at all of this, and then I'm going to give you guys my top 5 takeaways. And obviously at the end of the video, we're going to be touching on the 12 rising signs, so you guys don't want to miss that. Definitely pull out your own natal chart so you can kind of take a look at where the axis of Leo and Aquarius is, and if you have any particular planets there, because obviously it pays to kind of know your chart and be prepared. For those of you guys who have no idea what I'm talking about, check out astro.com, put in your time, date of birth, and location. See your kind of natal placements and if you have any planetary placements in any one of these 2 particular signs. If you guys still don't know what I'm talking about, click the links below, head over to my website at beyondtheveiltarot.com. Definitely consider checking out my schedule and booking a reading with me. So the question is, what are the nodes and what do they represent collectively? And this is where every kind of different view of astrology is going to have a different perspective of what the North and the South Node represent. I love actually Vedic astrology's kind of perspective on this, that they see these as almost like invisible planets. And I try to see it the same way, these invisible kind of markers in the sky. And really, they're mathematical points. So the 2 places where the moon's orbit crosses the sun's path, basically this is how it's like being seen from Earth. That intersection is exactly where the eclipses happen. And the nodes are quite literally the eclipse points. So in astrology, the North Node represents where we are all going collectively. That is going to be the North Node in Aquarius. And it is unfamiliar territory. It represents kind of like the edge of evolution, qualities that we're being asked to develop. And the South Node, which is going to be moving into Leo, is going to be representing what's familiar, where we have already kind of done some of those things, maybe our default patterns, our instincts, and things that are connected to the past, both this lifetime and previous lifetimes. Now, in your own natal chart individually, your nodes are going to show you your own personal soul's journey. And obviously collectively, since the nodes move through the whole zodiac about, once every 18 and a half years, they mark chapters in humanity's shared story. And I think this is what's so amazing about astrology, is that when we kind of zoom out and we don't just look at our own natal chart, we can see what's going on for all of us collectively. And this is especially so amazing to see like the North Node in Aquarius, because it literally is about all of us collectively and where humanity is going. And this is probably one of my favorite places to kind of see the North Node move through. Now, every single sign is going to take its turn moving through, its own axis. And we get to watch those same themes that are going to be cycling back around. And each time we're going to see similar patterns, but there's always going to be a twist because, well, outer planets are going to be in different places. So the date of this particular transit is actually going to be on July 26th, but it's not limited to that one particular day. Like I said, we're going to see the North and the South Node in Leo and Aquarius all the way until March 26th, 2028. So we've got some time, and then when we get to the spring of 2028, then the nodes are going to be shifting into Capricorn and Cancer, and it's going to be about 19 months total that we're going to see this transit completely. For who this is going to be impacting the most, this transit will be felt by everyone. So I just want to start by saying that, yes, there are going to be certain signs that are going to feel it a little bit more, but I think in particular, people who are going to be feeling it the most are going to be anybody who has any planets in Aquarius or Leo in particular, because the North and the South Node are moving through that sign. We're also going to see people who have anything in the fixed placements, especially in 2027. In particular, I would say Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, anything from 29 to 20 degrees of these signs, because we're going to see the North Node move from about 21 to 29 degrees between now and the end of this year. So take a look at your chart to see if you have anything between that 29 and 20 degrees of the fixed signs. And you guys are going to either be feeling the effects of the opposition, the conjunction, or the square, just due to the angles that we're going to see with these particular signs. And the fixed signs obviously are notorious for kind of carrying an energy through. They can be a little bit more rigid. They don't necessarily want to embrace change. And I think this matters because the nodes are also going to be moving slowly, and they're moving actually backwards. So if you guys notice, the nodes are starting at 29 degrees this week, and then it's going to be moving all the way up to about 21 degrees by the end of this year. So if you know your chart, check those degrees, especially with all of the fixed placements, because obviously you're going to be finding yourself right kind of square in the mix of some of the eclipses and some of the nodal changes. Now, what does the North Node in Aquarius represent? Well, the North Node in Aquarius, I think, is really about asking us to grow into our role as part of something bigger than ourselves. I guess that's, if I had to kind of encapsulate it with one sentence, it would be that. Aquarius is obviously the sign of community. This is a sign that deals with innovation. It's also about technology, humanitarian ideals, and also like the future. So this is a placement that really wants us to detach a little from personal drama, right? South Node in Leo. And also ego, and instead ask, what does the collective need? So it's really, for the next 18 months, going to favor group efforts over solo acts. And it's also going to be about unconventional thinking over tradition, and progress over kind of like ego preservation. So we'll see that growth here actually looks like showing up for our community, for our friend group, for our causes, and trusting that our individuality is still intact, even if we're not like the center of attention. Now, what about the South Node in Leo? Well, the South Node in Leo is really our comfort zone, right? So this is going to kind of represent where we're being asked to kind of graduate from. Although some of us are also going to feel that this could be pitfalls of things that we fall kind of back into because it's old habits or things that feel comfortable. Others are going to be tapping into their genuine sense of creativity, romance, anything that's connected to self-expression. And collectively speaking, I think it does create a little bit of drama, but I love the South Node in Leo energy. I think it's warm, it's very creative, it's very prideful. There was a lot of expressive kind of tendency here. and none of that is being kind of like demonized. I think the South Node is really saying that we have to just be mindful of the shadow side. And that could be over attachment maybe to being seen, maybe being right, or being kind of like the main character energy. And this is where that South Node in Leo is really the ego for ego's sake. It's performance maybe without substance, and leadership that really centers around a leader instead of the people. And that I think could be one of the bigger problems that we kind of see. And it's more or less like an invitation to keep Leo's kind of genuine gifts and really focus on being courageous, creativity, and really focusing on like the heart space, while releasing the need to have maybe constant validation and applause from, other people who are kind of like watching. Now, the last time that this happened, we're going to go through several cycles and we're going to talk about these cycles. But the last time that we had this particular South Node in Leo, North Node in Aquarius, ran from December 19th, 2007 to about August 21st, 2009. Before that, we saw it in May of 1989 to November of 1990. So these give you a little bit of like reference points, but basically most recently think about the tail end of the 2000s. Now, specifically during the last cycle, I want to take a look at what happened in the world from 2007 to 2009. This is the one that is going to be, I think, the most kind of fresh in our minds because this is the last time that it took place. And I think about this time fondly. I mean, I think just me personally being like a natal North Node in Aquarius, I'm like, yes, let's get ready to party. I think a lot of us are kind of known for that. But I've been reflecting a little bit on what was taking place during that year. And that was like the year that I graduated from high school. I remember voting and, the big presidential race with Obama that was going on. I also think about what was kind of happening with the global financial crisis that was taking place during that time. Now, this is when Lehman Brothers collapsed in the fall of 2008. I believe it was September. And we saw the housing bubble burst. And by the time that the transit ended in 2009, unemployment and foreclosure rates had spiked, all around the world. And so there is some connection and correlation with the North Node in Aquarius and the South Node in Leo as kind of major fluctuation points in the market, and sometimes periods where we saw things that were obviously kind of, at the bottom. It's very kind of Aquarius versus Leo here. Centralized systems of power, which is going to be Leo. So that could be the banks, individual moguls, billionaires, people who have had long-standing money and control, cracking under pressure and forcing a move towards transparency and decentralized structures, which is very much the North Node in Aquarius. Now, back then, we actually saw President Barack Obama. He happens to be a Leo sun with a Leo North Node in his own chart, was elected in November of 2008, right in the thick of this transit. And he actually stepped into leading the world's response for, some of the actions connected to the financial collapse. Now, on the Aquarius side of things, we actually saw that this window quietly kind of gave birth to some of the tech culture that I think many of us now kind of take for granted. We also saw that this is a time where the Bitcoin white paper was published in 2008 as a direct response to that same banking collapse. I think this is about as textbook Aquarius solution to a Leo-style crisis as it gets. So if you guys haven't read that, definitely check it out. Now, we saw Google Chrome was launched in 2008. Spotify launched that same year, and social media just really matured very fast within this particular window, with platforms that were scaling into mainstream. And also we saw that it was really reshaping how we connect collectively, how we organize, and also how we get our news. Now, there is a laundry list of kind of global trends, and this could be media, tech, and finance and culture that I just kind of want to cover. And I would say just financially in a nutshell, the 2008 financial crisis, we saw banking bailouts. We saw the beginning also of the Great Recession. For tech, other than Bitcoin's founding white paper and Google Chrome and Spotify, we just saw expansive, kind of growth among all kinds of social networking. Facebook was also significantly taking off, and it was laying the groundwork also for all kinds of other social media apps that we still use today. As for politics, we saw this historic United States presidential election and a global wave of stimulus and recovery packages that was being promoted by all kinds of world leaders. And culturally, we saw a pretty significant shift towards more communal, network-driven ways of organizing. This was also a time where we saw some of the earliest seeds of crowdfunding, decentralization, and this kind of we're all in this together messaging. But global changes brought about tension and conflict between centralized power and power blocks, including, during this time we saw the Russia-Georgia war in 2008. And the pattern across all of these kind of, particular cycles is we see old centralized ego or personality-driven systems that was really straining and sometimes breaking, while more networked, humanitarian, and tech-driven alternatives, Aquarius, were starting to kind of quietly take root. Now, going further back and taking a look at other previous cycles, we go back another 18 and a half years, and we're going to be taking a look now at 1989 to 1990. Now, if we rewind and we look at this cycle, it's interesting because I would say this is the time period that the world got wired. And this is the one that I was personally born under. I've got North Node in Aquarius. Was born in 1989, and definitely feel, I guess, a little blessed to have been able to kind of experience both worlds. Like, I remember when the internet kind of came online. I remember when we started having, AOL, and we had to have like the CDs and the discs to be able to kind of get on the internet. The beginning of, instant messenger. I mean, I come from the Zanga, kind of period, pre-Facebook and any of that stuff. And this particular cycle actually ran from spring of 1989 until about mid-November of 1990. And this is, I think, the cleanest Aquarius Leo story on record, personally. On the Aquarius side, we saw that community networks, was a huge theme. This was also the beginning of the collapse of old, I think, ways of running things. This is where Tim Berners-Lee wrote the original proposal for the World Wide Web, and this was in March of 1989. And this is also the time period that the Berlin Wall fell, around mid-November of 1989, and it was really dissolving of one of the most rigid, centralized kind of power divides of the 20th century, pretty much overnight. Now, on the entertainment side, obviously, and with like celebrity culture, that same window gave us Time Warner Inc. This is Warner Communications merger, and it was forming what became one of the largest media and entertainment conglomerates in the world. It was very much Leo meeting Aquarius moment, and this is where personality-driven entertainment brands consolidated into a network media empire. Then in 1998 to year 2000, so this is a different cycle, but I want to talk about this one. We saw Y2K and the boy band takeover. So this is something else that I was kind of thinking about. I was like, this is kind of cool because during those cycles, we did see a lot of activity that was going on in Aquarius and Leo. And I have to give this one a moment here because it's one of my favorite illustrations, I think, of like this entire axis, even though it's technically the mirror image. So this was flipped of what we're discussing today. This took place from October of 1998 to April of 2000, where the nodes were in the exact same Leo-Aquarius axis, but it was flipped. I think about like the Y2K moment, and if those of you guys who are not old enough to know, like basically all of our computers, our ATMs, all of our software, everything, like the media had us convinced that the world was going to end and that we were going to see the Y2K happen, where it was going to be, New Year's Day, January 1st of the year 2000, and that the world was going to shut down, that the computers were not going to know how to process beyond the 1990s. And we saw the so-called like millennium bug. So this was very much like an Aquarius fear about interconnected computer systems, dates, and also networks all failing, and that was the rollover from 1999 to 2000. I know it sounds completely insane now, but it never materialized into chaos that everyone braced for. But I think it perfectly kind of captures the energy of like Aquarius and how that can kind of impact everybody collectively, and the shadow side, which in this case was fear around technology and systems and the collective all at once. Meanwhile, we saw the North Node that was like pulling culture towards pure, glittery, kind of personality-driven spectacle. So this is a time where we saw all of the boy bands happening. The Backstreet Boys released their Millennium album in spring of '99. NSYNC had their album No Strings Attached. And then we also saw right at the end of this nodal window, all of these like major pop stars had all of these like shattering weak, sales records when it comes to their albums. This was also a time where MTV had Total Request Live, and it had launched in 1998, kind of turning pop stardom into like a daily obsessive, fan-driven kind of like ritual. Britney Spears, the Spice Girls, you know, I think we're kind of like the final wave of this, and the whole kind of teen pop explosion really kind of crested right here. And it was really pure North Node and kind of Leo energy. And it was all about individual charisma, stage presence, and kind of being adored by millions. But here's the twist that makes it such a perfect Leo Aquarius story, is that all of that glossy individual pop stardom was actually built right at the top of a brand new kind of networked technology that would actually soon dismantle the entire industry underneath it. Now in 1999, in June of 1999, Napster, right in the middle of this window, introduced peer-to-peer file sharing, which gave the world its very first taste of decentralized network access to music. The very Aquarius innovation that would go on to upend the music business within just a few short years. Even Apple's design language at the time, the candy-colored translucent, I think it was like the iMac 3G G3s released in 1998, captured the same shiny individual object meets kind of networked future. And that aesthetic was really, I think, defining the whole like Y2K kind of look. Now in 1970, okay, so in 1970 to 1972, we saw gold and the birth of the ticker. Now, this was a cycle from November 3rd, 1970 to April 27th, 1972. The headline event here is the Nixon shock of August 1971, when the US officially ended the Bretton Woods system and cut the dollar loose from the gold standard. Now, a textbook Aquarius moment of dismantling the old, fixed, centralized financial structure in favor of something that was more fluid and kind of abstract. I guess today we would call this fiat currency or kind of floating exchange rates. This is also when the NASDAQ and the first electronic network-based stock exchange made its debut. Now, this is quite literally building a new financial network, and in place of the old kind of, trading market floor model. On the Leo side of things, this window also includes Nixon's secret White House recording system. Obviously, South Node in Leo is very ego, it's image, desire for control and legacy. And Kissinger's landmark visit to China, beginning the era of, this major shift. It's the era of Diente. I think I'm saying that right. A very individual leader shaping history through diplomacy kind of story. So culturally here, this kind of represents a time where we saw just a lot of significant shifts. This was the first rainbow gathering we saw in 1972, which is an early countercultural kind of community festival movement that fits the Aquarius theme of kind of collective gathering over individual spectacle. Then in 1952 to 1953, this was another cycle that we saw with the North Node in Aquarius and the South Node in Leo. And this is where television entered every living room in America. Now, going back to this cycle from March 29th, 52 to October 9th, 53, this is a personal favorite of mine because I think it's such a pure entertainment story. This is the window when television exploded into true mass medium. We saw CBS Television City opened in Hollywood, and this is the very first televised political ads that aired for Eisenhower's campaign spots. Very much like a Leo kind of personality on brand moment. We also saw I Love Lucy become such a cultural force that 68% of American television sets were reportedly tuned in to watch I Love Lucy give birth to little Ricky in January of 1953. Now, Hollywood's golden age was in full swing. We saw films like Singing in the Rain and The Greatest Show on Earth dominating the box office and also the award circuits. But if you notice the timeline, Leo, which is Hollywood celebrity personality spectacle, kind of found its way into every single home through Aquarius, broadcasting, technology, networks, and mass communications. That's really the whole Leo kind of Aquarius story, I think, in all of it. And this is decades before the internet even really existed. Now, there's another reoccurring pattern that I wanted to kind of talk about because these two particular signs are very much connected to finances, And I wanted to do a little bit of like a spotlight on markets and gold and speculation. There's a fascinating kind of financial rhythm across these Leo Aquarius handoffs that I think is worth knowing about. If we go even further back in time, we saw the similar access during the Roaring 20s. That was very much a Leo flavored decade of speculation. Obviously, it was really about glamour and excess, and it gave way to the Aquarius era of the Great Depression. Now, we also saw the space race optimism of the early 1960s, Leo, and that gave way to Nixon's 1971 gold shock, Aquarius, and that was really breaking the financial system entirely. But also in the 1990s, we saw the dot-com, era, and this is, I think, also important because as the internet was really starting to kind of gear up in the 90s, it eventually led to a point where we had the dot-com bubble bust. And that also kind of bled into 2008. It was just kind of like a kicking the can down the road type of situation, where then we eventually saw the Great Recession, Aquarius. Then we see in 2017 and 2018, there was a crypto bubble, Leo, and arguably meeting its reckoning point now as this Aquarius North Node arrives alongside a massive AI-driven speculative boom in the markets. But does this necessarily mean that AI is going to boom, or is it potentially going to be a big bust? Now, this pattern tends to kind of be Leo-ruled eras inflating confidence, speculation, people investing into it, and it being excess, right? South Node. Including historically, we've seen gold rushes and casino-style runs and high-profile romances and kind of celebrity pairings that also capture, the public imagination. While then when we get into the Aquarius side of things, this forces a reckoning, a restructuring, and kind of like a redistribution of whatever got concentrated into few hands. Now, I think this is important if you like to trade or you like to invest. It's genuinely, I think, interesting and important to kind of look at some of the historical patterns and sit with it before heading into 2026 into 2028. And since our current 2026-2028 cycle runs in the opposite direction, right, North Node in Aquarius, South Node in Leo, rather than in the reverse, it's worth kind of sitting with the mirror image here, because in 1998 to 2000, it built the glossy individual stardom on top of quietly kind of disrupting new technology. And I think our current cycle may mask entertainment and celebrity culture to do the reverse. I think it's going to be about loosening the grip on the individual and personality-driven fame and leaning into being more so kind of networked, community-built, fan-powered forms of entertainment and connection. And it's definitely worth watching some of these themes over the better part of the next 2 years. Now, you can't talk about the South Node in Leo without romance and relationships. Obviously, these Leo cycles have historically coincided with eras of high visibility, larger than life kind of celebrity love stories and kind of capturing the public attention. While Aquarius cycles tend to shift the conversation towards more unconventional relationship structures, really high-end, big news kind of like divorces or separations, unconventional relationship dynamics, or, people potentially kind of going at love in their own way. And this can mean it's really putting a highlight on online dating, digital and long distance connection, and community-based ways of kind of finding love. And so I think that's something worth watching also as this cycle unfolds, especially with dating technology kind of continuing to evolve. Now, the sun is going to be a really important planet to watch because the sun is going to be acting as the dispositor of the South Node in Leo, because Leo is ruled by the sun. And the sun's always changing signs. It's always moving. We see about every 3.5 weeks or so that it's going to be moving into another sign. So that means that whenever the sun's coming into conjunction or squaring or opposing something, also these solar eclipses or any aspects that you're going to see with the sun is definitely going to be kind of coloring some of the effects of the South Node in Leo. Now, basically, wherever the sun goes and whatever it touches becomes a little bit more relevant now in how we're kind of processing the South Node energy. We really want to watch Leo season, so that's going to be kicking off here very soon. In this next week, we're going to start watching the sun coming into conjunction with Jupiter. There's going to be some trines to Neptune and Saturn and some other planets, so it is a little bit more free-flowing. And the sun is going to be making some major aspects to outer planets this year. So we'll talk about that in a moment. I'm going to give you guys some of my kind of like hot zones of some of the transits that I'm watching. But just know that some of the solar transits are going to be like little mini report cards on this whole South Node journey. Now, Uranus in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius are going to be the dispositors, basically, that are going to be kind of influencing things. And I guess I would say more so it's going to be probably Saturn and Uranus, but Pluto is going to be important to watch. So Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius, and then Uranus is the modern day ruler, but Pluto would definitely be a close third that we're going to be watching as we're kind of going through the North Node in Aquarius transit. Right now, with Uranus transiting in Gemini, and it's going to be there for the better part of like almost the next 7 years, and Uranus and Saturn kind of being still in a slight sextile to each other, they're in great kind of harmony. And air and fire works together very well. They fuel each other. We know that with Saturn kind of moving through Aries retrograde in this next week, it's really talking a lot about the changes that we're going through on a personal level, while Uranus in Gemini is talking about these shifts in our mindset, how we connect, how we get around, and how we communicate. So we've got our outer collective growth into Aquarius being filtered through these two particular placements. Now, Uranus in Gemini, brings like a screenshot, a fast-moving idea-driven kind of innovation, and I really want you guys to think about like rapid information exchange, AI, media, communication, and technology evolving quickly. While Saturn in Aries is asking us to be building real structure around new beginnings and individual kind of initiatives. That means that discipline applied to bold action rather than impulsiveness for its own sake is going to be important during this cycle. But because they aspect each other through a sextile, together they're suggesting that our path towards Aquarian kind of community and progress runs both through innovation in how we think, communicate, and learn, Gemini, but also through holding ourselves accountable, being disciplined, practicing courageous leadership, having a new vision also, because Uranus is kind of sextiling Neptune. I also feel like Pluto is going to be an important piece of the puzzle as we start to see the South Node and the North Node shift signs. Uranus and Pluto are locked into a trine by degree. So there is definitely a sense of humanity evolving, and that's going to be connected to how we connect, how we learn, how we travel, things that are connected to gadgets, what's going to be innovating online, what's going to be innovating with information, with media. And that could be new apps, that could be new phones, new gadgets, changes in language, changes in computing, and all that stuff. Everything that's going to be kind of Aquarian is very much connected to that. Air trines are also going to deal a lot with information and shifts in how we socialize and how we retain information and how we're learning and kind of connecting in a much more abstract way. And thankfully, I think having Neptune that's going to be sextiling these two means that a lot of individuals are waking up. They're asking questions, they're getting curious. They're also starting to reevaluate, do we like the direction that humanity is going in? If we don't, what can we personally do? What can we say? What can we share? What can we learn to be able to kind of better, redirect ourselves, especially because I see Aries as like the helm, how individuals are kind of, taking control of their own ship personally to, better advocate for changes collectively into the future. And that's very much what Aquarius is about. It's the future. Now, I think about the incoming full moon in Aquarius that's going to be happening here later this week. And this is, in a way, almost the doorway to this really significant shift that's going to be happening with the North Node going into Aquarius. Not only is this going to be the very first lunation since the North Node has moved into this sign, but if you guys remember correctly, this is also going to be the full moon that is going to be the bookend from the solar eclipse in Aquarius that we had earlier this year in February. Now, that solar eclipse was in a hard angle to Uranus and Taurus at the time, and this did represent where collectively we were all going to see some big changes with money, resources, food, the planet, and potentially some destabilizing things going on with the banking and crypto systems. So the fact that this is coming in on the 29th and we're going to see this very first full moon, now that the North Node has changed its signs, I think is important because it's basically kind of saying to everybody collectively, surprise, this is where we're going. On top of that, because it's completing that particular eclipse, I think it's a full moon that's going to feel like one. And we're going to see the moon is going to be conjunct Pluto, and we're going to see the sun is going to be conjunct Jupiter. What was the quote? It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, right? And I really feel like that sums up like the full moon in general. This is going to be the one that's really going to kind of kick the door in, and this very first lunation of the entire new nodal era. So it's a loaded one. That Sun conjunct Jupiter, exact to the degree. It's Jupiter's big moment of the year, and Jupiter is going to make everything feel bigger, brighter, more joyous, more explosive maybe. And the Moon conjunct Pluto is going to represent the emotional reaction and the emotional response to some jaw-dropping situation, okay? So it could be exposés, it could be somebody significant dies, it could represent some big whistleblower situation in regards to technology or surveillance or data or information. And it's a big one. And you know, full moons, they highlight something. They illuminate and bring up the intensity and the polarity of that axis. It brings it to a culmination. So this moment isn't just something that's happening on the 29th. This has been a buildup that's been taking place for the better part of the last 6 months. So what this means to me is that this full moon is not subtle. It's quite intense. And I think that we're going to see a lot of contrast, which we generally see with full moons anyway, but I would say more so with this one than normal, where the darkness is really being exposed, Moon Pluto, and it's being purged out collectively, and it's being brought forth by the light. And I always tell you guys, I've said this several times over the years on my channel, it takes a little bit of light to illuminate, you know, the dark. And that's what this is going to be. But Jupiter and the Sun is big light, right? Big spotlight on leadership, on law, on things that are connected to international relationships, to trade, to things that are connected maybe to the justice system, things that are going to be really spotlighting, you know, leadership and whether or not there's a lot of public criticism. I would say a lot of people can be very cold, detached, angry, being like, this thing's got to go, you know, or this person's got to go with this full moon. And with the Sun conjunct Jupiter, yeah, it's going to amplify confidence, visibility, generosity, and boldness. But this is probably one of my personally favorable configurations of the summer because it's really about putting yourself out there. But that Moon conjunct Pluto is going to be putting something heavier out into kind of like the ethers. This is about intense emotions, shadow dynamics, power dynamics, and unconscious material that's bubbling up around the concept of groups, technology, and belonging, or the darker side of where kind of humanity is heading. So picture it as like this transit's whole theme in a miniature. It's going to be the pull between wanting to shine as an individual, Sun, Jupiter, and the need to reckon with deep collective power structures, you know, Aquarius and Pluto. And I'm expecting a release around outdated, you know, group dynamics alongside a genuine boost of courage to be seen, and just a lot of illuminating the light. You're just going to see a lot of people that are going to start to break into two camps. They're just going to be like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. This is coming crashing down. And other people are going to go, okay, good. It's about time, you know, or you're going to see people who are going to be like, just keep on keeping on, like be positive, be optimistic, you know. And I would encourage you guys not to fall into the realm of doom and gloom. And if you guys caught my full moon in Aquarius video that I did recently, I talk about how this is an interesting full moon because like in 2 years time, this is going to be a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse, excuse me. So in 2028, this is going to be a solar eclipse where the North Node, Pluto, and Mars are all going to be involved in a solar eclipse. And inevitably, we are going to see a hard realignment. So I'm choosing personally to enter into this time period, you know, with this full moon coming in and this nodal change to basically be like, look, you know, I know this thing, you know, in my Aquarius area of my life is inevitably going to change. Do I want to do it okay, let's just rip off the bandage kind of now way and just kind of get the show on the road and kind of accept whatever's happening? Or do I want to have the hard course correction in, well, 2 years? So the beauty is that you guys get to decide. But I think that with some of the aspects here, you know, I think it's important to at least acknowledge that we all collectively have to go there together. Long gone are the days of people going, well, that's not going to affect me, you know, or I don't have to worry about that, or, you know, I'm not a part of that group, or I don't participate in that belief system or that, you know, kind of political party or that kind of, you know, ideology. And I would say, no, everybody's going to get impacted with some of the decisions that leadership is going to start making. And also I think that we're going to start to see where people have been probably a little bit too idealistic or taking too many risks about the inevitable kind of redirection of, well, AI, technology, and things that are also going to be going on in politics. Politics is very much Aquarius. Now then we get to the solar eclipse in Leo, and I have not really gotten to talk about this much yet. I did talk about it briefly on my horoscope, so if you guys haven't seen those, definitely check them out. But there's going to be some dedicated stuff coming up specifically for these eclipses. But on August 12th, 2026, we're going to have the second eclipse that's going to be a part of this, you know, new kind of nodal cycle. And this will be a solar eclipse in Leo. So right on the heels of the nodes entering Leo this week, now in a couple of weeks on the 12th, we see this is the true kickoff eclipse of the South Node story. So this is a potent new moon that delivers seeds around identity. It's around self-expression. It's around what we're ready to release from old ego-centered patterns. Because it's a South Node eclipse, it often surfaces kind of like endings and culminations or like aha moments and realizations that are kind of tied to things that we've outgrown rather than big brand new beginnings. Now, I personally feel like this is the best eclipse all year. I feel like a lot of the other eclipses that we saw, in the spring of this year, and also, the other eclipse that's going to be happening in August, the Pisces eclipse, have not been as easy. We've seen a lot of hard squares to Uranus. We've seen a lot of either retrogrades or other things that are kind of going on in the mix. And this one, having the sun in its own sign, having Jupiter nearby, which is going to be a beneficial out with the old, in with the new, right? South Node eclipse, new moon. And then Mercury, which is going to represent better communication. And all of these planets are kind of harmonizing with Neptune, which is great for inspiration, divine timing, spirituality, our vision, our creative abilities, our dreams. And Saturn, which is going to provide structure. And I think that the real only challenge here is that we're dealing with the South Node, right? So there is a sense of being like, well, I don't want to let this go, or, my ego is getting in the way, or there's some drama that's, kind of coming up. I also think that this is pretty damn active on the New York Stock Exchange chart. It's going to be happening very close to the ascendant. This should be really lighting up the stock exchange and also the Bitcoin chart, from what I remember correctly. And this is going to feature, Mercury in opposition to Pluto. So there's definitely going to be some jaw-dropping kind of information or news or things that are going to be kind of coming up. Like some of the aspects that we're seeing, to Uranus, obviously to Saturn. We've got some sextiles to Venus. And really the only other issue I think is like the Venus-Neptune opposition, where a lot of people are going to be shocked about a relationship, or maybe they're overly idealizing someone or something, or they put all their money into something speculative. And I've thought for a very long time, and I've been talking to my husband about it recently, I'm like, this whole thing with AI kind of makes me concerned. Like there's some concerns about how much money, they're putting into some of these companies, and also some of the developments that are coming out of like China, and some of the models that China is making, where they're making things that are faster, it's better, it's cheaper, it's more affordable in comparison to American models. And you've got a lot of, people who have been investing into all of these like, technical companies and AI companies that may potentially be put in a position where it's like, if competing companies in other countries are going to be doing it better and they're going to be doing it cheaper, what does that mean for investors? And are we getting to a situation where some of these companies are not actually able to like start being in the green? Are they making money, right? Because if they're not making money and they're still continuing to develop, and now we've got, a president who's basically saying AI is considered to be, national security, we've got some problems here financially. And I have some real grave concerns for this kind of turning into another like .com bubble bust situation where everybody bought into the speculation and into the hype. And potentially it needs to be brought down a few pegs, but you may have some real significant numbers of people who have been invested. So be very, very careful with some of the markets right now, because I think things are going to be very wild, especially between now and the fall. Now, for the transits that catch my eye during this particular cycle, first things first, I would say just this ongoing Uranus-Pluto trine. And we're going to see this happening for some time. It's already happened once this year. It's going to be continuing to happen pretty much for the next few years. And it looks like that this trine is very rare. And its exact first trine landed on July 18th, 2026, just days before the nodes change signs. And then we're going to see it again on November 29th, 2026, June 15th, 2027, July 13th, 2028, and May 9th, 2028. Okay, so this aspect hasn't occurred in this same series since 1921 to 1922, and it won't repeat again until the 2060s. Now, because Pluto sits right at the North Node's kind of ruling sign, this trine essentially is supercharging the entire Aquarius North Node story. And what this means is that it's supporting real structural and like technological and cultural transformation that's flowing more easily than tense Uranus-Pluto squares that we saw in like the 2012 to 2015 kind of period. So think when we saw like Occupy Wall Street, We saw Edward Snowden come out, you know, with his whistleblowing kind of testimony, the rise of platform monopolies, you know. This time, what fractured then has a chance to actually integrate. I'm also thinking about the South Node in Leo trining Chiron in Aries, and we're going to see that when Chiron retrogrades back into Aries. So that's going to start kind of picking up here. And it looks like it's going to be at 29. So you're going to see that right towards like September of this year, right around September 17th. And we'll see it kind of briefly off and on from September 17th, 2026 through April 14th, 2027. Now, during this window, transiting Chiron is going to be forming a trine, which is a supportive angle. It's a fire trine to the South Node in Leo. So it's going to be right here. 29 degrees is always a critical degree. Obviously, that South Node being on Regulus is like the fall of a king or a significant change with the royal family. I think we might see something like that. That also happens to be President Trump's ascendant. So there is like a healing aspect where, you know, old wounds tied to self-expression, confidence, and being truly seen, right? You know, Leo can find real relief and I think validation through bold self-initiated action, Aries. So if you've been kind of like nursing a wound or not feeling like you are being enough, this window offers, I think, an opportunity for real repair. And it's not by hiding, it's by actually acting on your own behalf. Now we're also going to see that there will be several periods of Mars conjuncting the South Node and Jupiter in Leo. And this one is the one that makes me a little bit more antsy. And this deserves its own video in its own right, but this is one of the first times that I'm like really, you know, focusing on talking about it. We're gonna see this around mid-November. So it looks like it's gonna be happening like right around, yeah, like November 11th, through about like the 18th, okay? So it's not just Jupiter hitting the South Node, it's Jupiter and Mars hitting the South Node. That's kind of a big deal. And this will also be trining Chiron. And remember, Mars is influencing what's going on with Saturn and Neptune. If Aries is individuals and Leo is what we love, what we take risks on, speculative markets, gambling, children, things that are connected to romance, self-employment. This is going to be a very, very, very interesting time. And you will see Mars and Jupiter hit the South Node several times because both of them will actually retrograde at the beginning of 2027. Now, the first exact hit is going to be around November 11th and November 12th-ish at 25 degrees of Leo. And there will be two more passes. You'll see one in February and you'll see one in April of 2027. Mars will also cross the same degree at points throughout the transit because in early 2027, we're going to see Mars retrograde from Virgo back into Leo. So this is crazy because, you know, I expect these windows to bring very big visible endings or culminations tied to identity, creative projects, old ego patterns, often with a generous, expansive kind of final chapter quality thanks to Jupiter. And there is going to be more urgent, action-driven quality wherever Mars is involved. So these can be good moments to consciously kind of release outdated self-concepts rather than have, you know, your life force kind of released for you. I have a really strong feeling that what's going to happen collectively is a lot of people are going to go, this doesn't make me happy anymore. This doesn't bring me joy anymore, you know, and they're just going to be like, I have to cut this off. And whether it's a relationship that's been dragging on too long, if it's, you know, some old personal, you know, childhood wound or issues revolving around self-love, it's going to be about cutting that off. I think a lot of people are going to notice that, you know, taking too much risk with speculation, and whether it's the stock market or if it's gambling, I think individuals could have some significant losses, like significant, because Jupiter is going to make it bigger. And you guys have to think about how this is happening on the heels of like where Mercury and Venus have been retrograding, you know, basically starting the retrograde in Scorpio and then going back into like Libra. And where it's going to cause a lot of relational harmony and a lot of issues within committed relationships, marriage, business partners, what have you, because you've got people that are taking a lot of risk, right? In romance or, you know, potentially in financial matters. So it's going to be pretty significant. The positive here is that the South Node with Jupiter, I think, can be liberation. And there can be a sense of people being like, you know what, I need to unplug, I need to disconnect. You know, I don't want to watch the world drama going on. I don't want to sit around and watch Fox News and listen to, you know, people just kind of commentate on war. I don't want to sit around and, mess with the stock market anymore. It's too volatile. I want to go hang out with my kids. I want to paint. I want to draw. I want to create. I want to have fun. And I think that a lot of people are just going to feel like what usually brought them that sense of excitement or that kind of dopamine hit, I think is very much Mars, Jupiter. They're going to be like, I don't want to do that any longer. And so it's good because it's trying to get individuals, I think with the trine to Chiron, to really check in with themselves and see where they need to heal themselves. It's not good in a sense of the fact that Jupiter is going to bring, I think, a lot more posturing by politicians. I think there's going to be a lot more people who are acting very kingly and kind of, self-righteous about things. And they're going to be, demanding that we go to war. And it's going to be about beating the drums of war. Actually, ironically, the later degrees of Aquarius is about drums. So watching Mars in the South Node come into conjunction, this is where I've said to you guys in previous videos this year, I'm like, by the end of 2026, likely America's going to war. And we're going to see that there's probably going to be some institutional move, to ignite a draft. And Mars is war, Leo is younger people, Jupiter is going to be things connected to law. And I think with those two planets retrograding, I think you're going to see something very similar to what we saw during the Vietnam era, where people were just burning their draft cards, but nowadays everything's digital. So now it's not you're being asked to go and sign up, you're being entered into it. And they're going to be pushing people to do that. And they're also going to be seeing that there's going to be probably so many fluctuations and things going on with the market that they have to create conflict. They have to create war because, well, war makes money. And then another one is going to be in the fall of this year, actually next year, it's going to be in 2027. We're going to see as the North Node is getting to the earlier degrees of Leo, it's going to start coming into a trine with Neptune. And you're going to kind of see that happening in like November of 2027. Now, Neptune is spending this entire nodal cycle at the very early degrees of Aries. It's not moving very quickly, largely hovering around that 3, 4, 5 degrees while it goes retrograde the second half of 2027. Meanwhile, the South Node in Leo is slowly backing towards the beginning of the sign, and you'll see September into October, it's going to hit that same kind of 3 to 7 degree range. So this is bringing in a supportive kind of fire trine with Neptune. And I'll flag this as like a approximate window rather than like a single exact date, because Neptune is barely kind of creeping in during its retrograde station, but this is like the season to watch. North Node trine Neptune, a softer, dreamier, I think, companion to the more intense outer planet aspects that we've covered. Neptune will be trine the South Node, and that's dissolving any old creative or ego-based kind of patterns rather than through crisis. So I'm expecting people to be nostalgic, almost like spiritually, there's like the spiritual quality to it, that whatever is ending is being released, and there's like a new identity and new self-expression that's kind of coming in during this window. I assume this is going to be a time where, art, music, film, any creative work that we're kind of tapping into is bigger than the self. And it's really fitting this undertone heading into, I guess coming out of the summer where we're going to see some like really big eclipses that are going to be happening in Leo. Now, another thing I wanted to show you guys is the February solar eclipse that we're going to have in 2027. And this is a very early look. And the reason why I'm doing this is because Aquarius is about the future, guys. So I'm not just talking about what's happening right now. I'm going to talk about what's happening way into the future. So we've got a solar eclipse that's going to happen in February 6, 2027. This will be the next solar eclipse in Aquarius. So kind of similar to the one that we had this year, different because it's not squaring Uranus. So that's good. And we've got a nice little sextile to Saturn, and we've got, it's too wide for a trine, but Uranus is now in Gemini, which is much easier than when it was in Taurus. This is interesting to me because it's going to be a solar eclipse, but it's going to be at a Leo degree, 17, okay? So this is just 3 days later after this eclipse, so this is a new marker, we're going to see Mercury turn retrograde, and it's going to turn retrograde from Pisces, and it's going to come back into Aquarius, and you're going to see that mid-February. And then it's going to go direct, conjunct the North Node. So that's going to be right around the beginning of March. So there's something big happening here. I think it's important kind of timing to kind of tap into, because whatever is coming to light around the eclipse regarding community, long-term goals, collective causes, that Mercury retrograde is saying, hold up, we need to kind of revise this, or we need to revisit this, especially because Mercury is tied to Uranus, okay? So we've got some mutual reception between Mercury and Uranus, which is kind of cool. This tells me also that there is going to be potentially some miscommunication or a little bit of like a second look before it fully kind of settles. So I'm expecting information and announcements or realizations from the eclipse window to kind of get reopened or revised or kind of reversed in the following week. So we'll see that kind of the end of February all the way into March. Now, we are going to see in 2027, it'll be from about roughly June 2027 through April 2028, we're going to see the north and the south nodes start coming into a square with Chiron and Taurus, okay? So it's wide, but it's starting, and then you're not really going to see this be more so exact until about here, but you're going to start seeing the beginning of 2028 when the north node hits a 2, Chiron's at a 0. This is going to be a very peak period for some big financial changes. And also we're going to get ready to see Saturn coming into Taurus too. So that's going to be a biggie. But I would not sleep on that. I think that, you know, with Chiron squaring the nodal axis, squares are going to represent friction points. And this represents one where we have to face our sense of security and self-worth, right? Taurus and Chiron could represent, you know, there is some tension with our evolving identity around community role and the nodes. And I would expect growing pains around money, around values and stability as we integrate these lessons. I also think we're definitely going to see some major stress tests in the financial system because Chiron's going to expose some of like the wounds and some of the issues with stability and where that North Node and Pluto is coming in. And I think it's going to be very similar to what we've seen in previous cycles where like there's this complete financial kind of rewiring that's taking place. And whether that's crypto or it's going to be stable coins, or we're going to see that we're going back to things that are going to be backed. I mean, you can go all the way back to the 70s when we looked at the cycle where, you know, Nixon came off the gold standard. And for those of you guys who don't know, from then on, it was like our currency had become completely debased. There was nothing behind it. We were just backed by the promise that, you know, we were basically good for it. And the United States being kind of the reserve currency, we're just like paying, you know, out our noses for everything because we're basically the currency that everybody is trading in. So it makes everything more expensive for us. So part of the issue here is that I think they're going to start kind of talking to everybody collectively, being like, look, this is, you know, a problem. We need to really start integrating some major changes with resources, or individuals are facing some real serious job loss, which by the way, we're going to see Jupiter coming out of a square with Uranus and Gemini. So you guys are definitely going to see how this is going to be impacting, I think like administrative jobs, healthcare jobs, you know, anything that's going to be like, you know, clerical related, anything with like documents or services, where by 2028, yeah, we're going to see a lot of jobs are going to be taken over, I think, by technology and AI. So another conversation might mean, okay, well, you know, how is this impacting the economy? You know, if we're in an economy where, you know, companies are making money because consumers, you know, are buying stuff. But when we get to a point where consumers can't buy things, they can't buy all of the latest models of cars, they're not buying as much clothes, they're not eating out as much, you know, they're not buying houses, they're not spending. That creates a big monkey wrench problem, right? For I think a world where everything kind of runs on buy more, have more, consume more. And maybe this is when they're going to start talking about some kind of like universal income. I think that may happen. And they might talk about it being a digital thing. So they might say, well, you know, we'll give it to you, but it's going to be some digital backed coin or something that's going to incentivize people to want to take it. Or maybe they're going to switch food stamps or other resources to things that are going to be like digital services. I could totally see that. Anyway, I'm just kind of spitballing and speculating, but that's going to be something that we're going to want to watch. And then we're going to see, you know, Jupiter will be moving from June 2026 until July 2027 through Leo. So going back a little bit, that means that it's going to be, you know, pretty much hanging around the South Node, which is kind of a, oops, sorry, we're kind of all over the place here, which is kind of an interesting cycle to be in, because the Jupiter South Node, some may look at this and they go, well, you know, this means that there's going to be some good karma coming in from the past, or there is going to be some joy, or that we're going to reconnect with old loves, or that maybe we're going to get in touch with our inner child and we're going to play and we're going to create. Yes, I definitely think some of those things can happen 100%. But it can also mean that it's amplifying everything that we've already covered about visibility, creativity, risk, and like letting go of something bigger. And we will see Jupiter and Saturn will be in several trines. One is going to be actually in August of this year, and then we're going to see 2 others next year. And that to me is telling me, as Saturn continues to move through, you know, Aries, at least till 2028, that slow build where it's discipline first quality is really positive for the North Node in Aquarius kind of lessons. And it's about being like, what can we actually get built? What can we actually do? And how can we turn these into long-lasting structures rather than, kind of staying abstract in our ideals? And also, how can we have fun with it, right? Trying to Jupiter, how can we be creative? I think it's going to be the boom, I think, of a lot of self-employed people. I think we're going to see a lot of people who are going to get a lot of recognition for being pioneers, for being the first in something that they've created. And, obviously Jupiter can be a lot of things. It can be a lot of things connected to culture, education. Education is going to be very big. How we can be educating future generations, right? It's very much Uranus and Gemini, but also Jupiter and Leo. And we're going to see, I think, a bunch of like just bright young minds. And it's probably going to start with like kids who are in high school who are going to be making some major innovations and some developments and kind of helping individuals become more self-aware and also a little bit more self-sufficient. I think that's going to be one of the things too. All right, so my top 5 themes for you guys, and that's what I want to give you now, is my top 5 themes for this particular nodal shift with the North Node in Aquarius and the South Node in Leo. I think the number one takeaway for me is we're going from me to we. And the central story of this whole transit is that individual glory is kind of giving way to collective contribution. And so I'll use the example of like where we saw like the shift from the independent kind of like pop stars to the shift with the boy bands, right? And so if you guys remember what was kind of going on during some of those cycles, pop music, boy bands, all this thing was becoming a thing. And like, yes, if you were somebody who kind of grew up in like the 80s and the 90s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Everybody had their favorite, member of Backstreet Boys or NSYNC or whatever, kind of group that you watch, but you still bought the album, right? And then obviously some of them did spin-offs and they tried to do their individual music, and that's great, but it wasn't always as good, unless you're Justin Timberlake, as the band in itself. And so I kind of keep that frame of mind when I'm thinking about the South Node in Leo and the North Node in Aquarius. What can we do together? How can we collaborate? How can we focus on where we are all going while still kind of respecting our own individual styles and such, but trying to focus on the collective rather than kind of feeling like one person is stealing the spotlight. This means that in order to do these things, number 2, old power structures have to crack open, okay? And so it's going to be exposed with the South Node in Leo, even more so with Jupiter and Mars hitting that. I think we're going to hear some things about where celebrity culture has, become too much, where we're idolizing people too much, especially people who've done some horrendous things. And whether that means they're involved in sports gambling and smuggling money, if it means that they're involved in child abuse, if it means that they were influencing, billionaires or politicians, all of that stuff I think is going to get exposed. And Aquarius is very much going to be, so when we think about echoing 2008, really expecting institutions to be built on centralized personality-driven authority, and where we're facing real pressure to reform and kind of decentralize some of those things. So we're breaking down where there's been too much government. We're breaking down where there's been too many monopolies. We're breaking down where there's been, too much focus on what institutions are saying and not really listening to the people or listening to the investors or listening to the crowd. Number 3, this is where technology and innovation takes center stage. And so what's cool is like Aquarius rules the future. So this is going to be, with this cycle, likely accelerating how AI, digital platforms, and I think networked communities are really going to start to kind of reshape our daily life. And just naturally, how that's changing the market with the South Node in Leo, how that's changing patterns in communications and ideas, how it's shifting something connected to how we learn, how we get around, how we read, how we get our media, but just due to the nature, I think, Uranus kind of being in that sign. And then number 4, this is also going to be about healing perfectionism and performance. I just think personally, like with the South Node in Leo, I like that it's going to be softened by some of the trines to Chiron. I think that this is offering real repair for anyone who's exhausted by needing to look like they kind of have it all together. I think that's going to be one positive. And then eventually, number 5, I think this is going to be about community as the kind of growth edge. Belonging, friendship, and shared purpose becomes kind of the terrain where some of our biggest personal growth happens over the next 2 years. And I think a lot of it's going to be about, in many ways, the North Node in Aquarius is like getting plugged in, but it's also about getting plugged in with true community. And it may not necessarily mean just online. It might mean where we're bridging the gaps and we're connecting in real life. We're kind of developing relationships in our local communities, right? Uranus and Gemini. And also just focusing on having better kind of communication and kind of discourse with people and sharing what's on our mind, even if that means we come from two different kind of perspectives. So what this basically means for us collectively is that we're being asked as a species to grow past the idea that individual achievement and personal spotlight are the highest goals, right? I think South Node in Leo is like, I have to be famous, I want to be worshipped. I want people to have posters of me and know who I am, and that doesn't mean that creativity, joy, or self-expression are being punished. I really want to reiterate that. Leo's gifts are real and we're not meant to abandon them, but we are being asked to redirect them and to use our unique light in service of something bigger than just getting our own applause. So what we want to watch for is systems, institutions, even relationships that ran on ego and hierarchy to keep facing pressure to become more inclusive, and to become more transparent, and also to become a little bit more community minded. Now, to best work with these nodal shifts over the next 18 months, I really recommend getting involved in a community, a group, a cause bigger than your personal life. This is literally where your growth is going to be living right now. I also encourage you guys to notice where you're seeking validation or performing for an audience and really ask what you do differently if nobody was watching. Maybe stay a little flexible around technology and new ways of doing things, even if they feel a little unfamiliar. And keep your Leo gifts, your creativity, your warmth, your confidence, but offer them as a contribution, not necessarily as a performance. And obviously use the eclipses that you're going to be seeing both in August of this year, but also February and August of next year, and eventually January of 2028, as kind of like natural checkpoints to reflect on this journey and see where you're at in terms of what the eclipses are bringing up for you and how it's aspecting in your chart. Now, one last thing I want to cover before we get to the 12 signs is I do want to do a little bit of a review of nodal returns. And that basically means that certain people who have their North Node in Aquarius or their South Node in Leo are coming into this once in like 18.5-year cycle where they're going to be having a return. So if you have that in your natal chart, this is definitely for you. Basically, when the transiting North Node comes back to sit in the same sign as where it was when you were born, if you guys were born with this transit, then your nodal return is going to be happening. And this is just kind of like a full circle moment for the themes that you were kind of born into, and it's kind of coming back around for like a second draft. So if you guys were born between these dates, you're likely going to be having your return window right now. And the most recent group is going to be December 19th, 2007 through August 21st, 2009. So those of you guys who are like 17, 18, 19 years old, this is your first nodal return. Congratulations. Such a big turning point in your life. This is a huge one. And this is where it's lining up with your kind of transition into adulthood. Graduating from high school, going to college, getting first jobs, having first experiences, right? It's very much kind of like the nodal return. And I expect this to feel like your whole sense of identity versus community and individual path versus group belonging is changing. So it's coming into focus for the first time as a young adult. Take a look at which houses this is happening in. It's going to point you in the direction of where you're going to go for your growth. And then you'll have your next one as you're getting closer to your late 30s. Now, if you're born from May 23rd, 1989 to November 18th, 1990, you're anywhere from 36 to 37 years old. So you're part of that group with me. This would be our second nodal return. This often brings a real, am I living the life that I was born to kind of, grow into, period. I would consider this a check-in. This is also a time where themes of community, technology, and humanitarian work is surfacing in a way that feels like unfinished business from your 20s. Just to give you guys feedback, I was thinking about this the other day because mine's going to be right around Christmas of this year. And I was like, what did I start doing when I was, like that age, when I was like 17, 18, 19 years old? I started reading astrology. That's what I started doing, tarot and astrology. That's what I started learning. And I joined groups and I went to, all kinds of like group classes, and it was something that developed into like my baby, because it was in my fifth house. So think about where this is for you. This is definitely a really significant time because those of you guys who are having this one, your post-Saturn return, right? So you're done with that. You just had your Jupiter return here recently. So that's also finished. And you're kind of a little bit of like in a limbo now where you're coming into, your Saturn square and you're also coming into your nodal return. So it's like this real hard alignment that's like, what am I supposed to be right now? And like, how am I evolving and turning into that person? Now, if you're born from November 3rd, 1970 to April 27th, 1972, you are anywhere from 54 to 56 years old. And this is your third nodal return. So congratulations. You guys have already kind of been through this a couple of times. And it tends to land right in the thick of like a major life shift. This is often tied to legacy, sometimes mentorship, letting go of old ego-driven identities in favor of contributing to something bigger. And if you happen to be somebody who's even beyond that in your years and you're born from March 29th, 1952 to October 9th, 1953, you're anywhere from about 73 to 74 years of age. This is your fourth nodal return, and I would consider this your full circle moment that's bringing you a renewed pull towards community, towards purpose, and being a part of a collective in this next chapter of life. Now, these date ranges tell you the sign your nodes were in, but the exact return moment depends on your precise degree, which is going to vary depending on your birthday and, that particular window. So for those of you guys who have your degree, your North Node degree from 29 to about 21 or 20 degrees, you will have it this year, okay? I think it's going to go from 29 to about 21, and then we're going to see it hit 20 in the new year. And if you guys happen to have, your degrees anywhere between 21 and 2 degrees of Aquarius, you're going to have yours likely in 2027. And if you have your North Node anywhere from 0 to 2 degrees of Aquarius, you're going to have your nodal return in 2028. But definitely a good time to consider booking a reading with an astrologer and kind of getting an idea of what's happening in your life. And like a solar return chart, or a Saturn return chart, you can see exactly which house it's going to be returning to give you a broader kind of idea of what the theme is going to be for the better part of the next 18 and a half years. All right, so we're going to now get into the 12 sign predictions, and we're going to talk about where these nodal changes are going to be happening for the 12 rising signs. As always, I am a Western astrologer. That's the kind of astrology that I like to practice. So to make the most of my readings, I recommend listening to your rising sign first to see which house the signs are going to be kind of taking place in. And you can listen to your sun and your moon sign too. It may correlate, especially if you listen to your moon sign, because the North and the South Node have to deal with the moon. But listen to whatever you like. And if you're a Placidus user, you're looking at where you have about, I would say at least this year, 29 to about 21 degrees of Aquarius, because that's where the North and the South Node are going to be kind of moving through. So you may have to listen to more than one rising sign for that. But let's go ahead and get on with the show. Let's talk about my Aries and my Aries risings. All right, Aries, you guys are going to be seeing the North Node entering into Aquarius in your 11th house, and the South Node is going to be entering into Leo in your natal 5th house. And so first things first, these are friendly houses for you. You've got trines from your 5th house to your 1st, which is kind of your direct involvement in creativity, joy, dating, romance, taking chances, and sextiles to your 11th, which is more about your involvement with your goals, your friends, your allies, and your community. So for the most part, I think you guys are going to dig this. You're also really going to want to pay attention because there's going to be months on end where we're going to see your chart ruler Mars moving through this part of the skies, and it's going to be happening at the end of this year, kind of going into the beginning of next year. And you'll see several months of having Mars kind of either in pre-retrograde or in retrograde in your 5th house. So it's going to be pretty personal for you. Now, your 11th house activates friendships, community, your future goals, while the South Node in Leo is connected to romance, creativity, and self-expression. So the theme for my Aries and Aries risings is that you're kind of stepping back from maybe personal creative glory to build something real, to build something lasting. Maybe it means that there's community long-term vision that's becoming an emphasis for you now. Maybe it means that new friend groups or collaborative projects or humanitarian causes are kind of calling your name. And I would say, let this play out over time. You're not going to figure it out all right now. Sometimes it takes till the end of the transit to really kind of get the bigger picture of what's happening. But let your creative gifts serve a group project rather than a solo spotlight for the next 2 years. especially like if you guys are getting involved in, because with Uranus in your third house, like online content, media, blogs, writing, maybe it's going to be, you know, something that you're sharing with your insight or kind of your beliefs somehow, and how that's kind of factoring into how you communicate, present, or kind of join a cause. Do you join a group? Do you start a group? That kind of stuff is the things that I would really focus on. And I feel like even though there's a lot of creativity and like a lot of the spotlight that will come from Jupiter being in your fifth, it's how you take something creative and you share it with the world, and how you give that to the world and help them change and transform with Pluto being there. So call your friends, check in on them, you know, get involved in local community things, and, you know, join associations, start clubs, join stuff online. I think this would be some of the best ways for you guys to really tap into this energy. And by all means, party, right? The North Node in the 11th house is about partying and kind of celebrating, and, you know, celebrating good times, and like focusing on where you can kind of champion other people and kind of boost them up. And likely you will find that they will do some of the same things for you. So good luck to my Aries and my Aries risings. For my Taurus and Taurus risings, you guys are going to watch the North Node going into Aquarius. You're going to watch the South Node going into Leo. And obviously, Taurus, you're a fixed sign. So if you have anything from about 20 to 29 degrees Taurus, Sun, Moon, or Rising, you're going to be smack dab locked in a square that you will be experiencing throughout this transit, which in its own right probably deserves its own video. And I may do that down the road for the fixed signs. But for right now, just know that Taurus is about stability, resources, pleasure, comfort, value, okay? You guys are creatures of habits. God bless you. So part of what you're going to notice is that that's kind of coming up for, is this comfortable? Is this working? Do I value this? How am I evolving? How am I changing? How's my body? As you're going through a redirection with your career, your public image, your status in the world, both professional and also your relationship status, and some kind of unearthing, releasing changes connected to your roots, your home, your family, your property. So it can feel a little bit more uncomfortable for you guys. But I think the positive here is that, you know, the theme is really about growing more into your public image, right? The North Node of the 10th house is the top of the top. And usually when I see this in a natal chart where somebody's got like the South Node in the 4th house and the North Node in the 10th, I always laugh because I'm like, let me guess, you moved away from your small town and you went to the big city to like make it big, you know? And there's always like a storyline that's kind of connected to that. So you may be a Taurus or a Taurus rising that's going through that right now, where it's like, well, you know, out with the old, I got to escape the, you know, the small town, or I got to move out of my parents' basement, or, you know, I'm feeling like this is just too much going on with like home and family, and I need to change something about my home while simultaneously kind of level up in a professional way. What you guys will find is that the South Node in your 4th house, it can bring up where you have been, you know, dealing with old patterns of hiding out at home or over-identifying with family drama. And I would watch for career shifts that are going to be tied to networks, right? Technology, humanitarian work, astrology, anything that's connected to science, innovation, maybe even, you know, forecasting, or things that are connected to, you know, like technology. I would say maybe crypto, that could be another one. And I think a lot of you guys are just learning to let go of needing your home to be picture perfect. And maybe you're investing your energy more into your public path rather than what's kind of going on in the home front. Now, what's interesting is that this is playing off of Uranus in your 2nd house. So, I mean, a lot of your career change might mean there's big fluctuation that's happening with you financially, or maybe you're making money in a new way, or maybe it's connected to crypto or something that deals with podcasting, writing, media, science, transportation, the list goes on. And I think what's cool is that Jupiter is going to go into your 4th house. So it can bring you some joy and expansion in your home, but it can also, over the next year or so, make some of the home stuff feel like it's just bigger than life, you know? So good things can happen, but it can also mean that when Mars and Jupiter start coming in together, you're like, I just really need to break away from these family patterns, or I need to move, or I need to downsize, or I need to upgrade. And I would watch for the balance between what's going on in your professional life versus what's kind of going on at home. And then as that's squeezing you, you're also just going to see how much of that you're kind of taking on like physically. So it's important for you to be grounding your energy, eating well, trying to have better kind of work-life balance, and easier said than done when you've got two giants, both Pluto in your career house and Jupiter in your home house, that have been recently kind of duking it out, and there's been a lot of stress. So sounds scary, but it's not. This is a total kick-ass time in your professional life, Taurus, and I think that you guys are really going to enjoy it. It's just about thinking differently about what you value and ultimately what it is that you're doing for a living. So good luck. Let me know what happens. Gemini rising. I think you guys are going to like this, especially with Uranus being in your sign. So that's playing beautifully off of the North Node in Aquarius. And obviously Aquarius is an air sign, so it will be trining you by sign as Pluto is already. And you're going to see Leo is a fire sign in your third house, which is sextiling. So it's a little bit friendlier for you guys. I would say you guys kind of have like a supporting role in this. North Node activating your ninth house of higher learning, travel, beliefs. Your teachers, your gurus, your philosophy, how you kind of see the world, versus the South Node, which is activating your third house of communication, siblings, local community. So the themes here are really going to be about expanding your worldview while pursuing bigger truths instead of staying comfortable in familiar local circles and everyday chatter. I would watch for opportunities to teach, to publish, to study, to travel abroad. And I would say yes to bigger conversations, even if it means leaving a comfortable kind of local bubble. Now, I think you're going to be comfortable doing that. Uranus, your ninth house lord, it's in your sign, especially if you're like the first 5 degrees or so of Gemini, you're definitely feeling the travel bug, or you're more adventurous. So there is a sense of you going, I want to go back to school. I want to publish something, or, I want to learn more about something. And what you're learning could be very much Aquarius. So you're learning about culture, you're learning about people. Maybe it means that you're more involved in education or legal matters or anything that deals with travel. And the aspects that you have overall, I think, are quite positive. But the South Node in the third house versus the ninth house North Node is something like, why would I walk, when I can get on a flight and go somewhere? So you're going to be rejecting the idea of where you have to play it small and stay in your local community, or what you have always learned, and you're kind of outgrowing some of that. And there is a lot of growth when it comes to your knowledge and just your beliefs. Mentors, teachers, gurus, these people can kind of come in during these eclipses. And generally this is a house that deals with good fortune because of its kind of Jupiterian nature. So continue to learn, evolve, and travel and see the world, and then watch your kind of perspectives, obviously, kind of expand. Good luck, Gemini. I hope you guys enjoy this one. All right, we've got Cancer and Cancer rising. You guys are going to do the South Node in Leo and the North Node in Aquarius in your second and your eighth houses. These are houses that are financial, okay? So that's one thing I'm going to tell you guys right now. These houses are interesting because the second house is very much about, what do I have? What do I possess? And that could mean how much money in the bank, what you can spend, what you're eating, what your style is, what you're collecting, what your values are. Versus the eighth house, which is going to be taxes, debts, loans, your partner's money, taxes, things that are connected to health insurance, car insurance, investments, and inheritance, or spousal support, child support, that kind of stuff. This is also a house that's very psychological. So it deals with like the karmic entanglements that you have with other people. Psychologically, obviously with Pluto there, maybe it could also be energetically. It could also represent where you're learning to embrace the unknown, right? And learning to kind of release this need of, I have to have more, I have to consume more, I have to collect more, I have to spend more. And you're leaning more into, the universe provides, right? North Node in Aquarius. What you guys will find is that the theme is about learning to trust others with your resources and going deeper in intimate bonds, rather than just relying solely on your own self-guarded security. So I would watch for shifts in joint finances. Some of you guys during this cycle will get an inheritance. Others will have some kind of a windfall. Maybe deep emotional bonding happens here. And I would say the tip is to release the instinct to kind of white knuckle your own resources. And real growth here comes through, I think, healthy kind of independence. What's interesting is that, Uranus is the ruler of the North Node and it's moving through your 12th house. So some of these endings are coming very abruptly out of the blue, and it can mean that, you're releasing this negative self-talk, right? Uranus trying Pluto. You're releasing any fears revolving around, endings or losing something. The key of the 8th house is regeneration. And so probably what's working in your favor is that you've got Pluto going through there as well, where there could be this romantic kind of like renaissance taking place in your life, or there's this sexual revolution, that's kind of taking place, or where relationships, children, things like that are putting the pressure on you to kind of be a little bit more direct in how you're managing joint assets with other people. While Jupiter is going through your 2nd house, which is definitely going to bring some windfalls this year. I think you will see that there is going to be more confidence. There is going to be an income boost. But I'm going to keep telling you guys, don't get cocky, because Jupiter and the South Node are going to meet several times. And I think really the lesson here is not about not just watching your budget and your spending, which I think is important. I think it's also going to be, just because these big booms come and you might inherit something, or you might be given something, or there is, your partner comes into some resources, ignoring the impulse to just then spend it, right? And want to buy things or want to consume things. And I think a lot of you guys are going to be doing that on travel, because Jupiter's travel, or on health, or things that are connected maybe to pets. And some of you guys will work hard and you'll earn the money too, because Jupiter's going to be about working. But I think I would just be really tapping into having a healthy balance of, what you're consuming versus what you're saving, and learning to kind of have a trust fall with relationships or the universe, and know that it's not about all of your output. Now it's going to be about some people that are going to be kind of giving to you as well. Good luck, Cancer. All right, Leo, you ready for this? South Node's going through your 1st house in your sign. North Node's going through Aquarius in your 7th house. Very interesting cycle for you guys, especially knowing that there are planets on both ends of the spectrum here, which are going to be pretty significant. Having the North Node, going through your 7th house is activating your 7th house of partnerships, one-on-one relationships, clients, business partners, marital partners, therapists, astrologers, all the people that you partner with. While the South Node is going through your 1st house, activating yourself, your identity, and your appearance. So this is your, in a way, kind of like nodal reversal, right? So pay attention. The theme here is deeply personal for you. I think it's really going to be connected to you being asked to grow through genuine partnership and compromise, rather than learning to lead solely from your self-focus. Now, what you want to watch for is major relationship development, like business partners or one-on-one collaborations. I would recommend practice asking, what does this relationship need? And as often as possible, what do I need? And really kind of finding the balance between the two. Now, you've already kind of seen recently, just due to the nature of like the eclipse that was there in February, this incoming full moon that we still haven't had yet. I'm actually filming it right before the full moon happens, which will be conjunct Pluto, opposite Sun and Jupiter in your sign. You're getting ready to see the dynamic of, what am I releasing in order to kind of gain, support and partnership. And the thing is like, if you're single, this cycle can bring in a very significant relationship, okay? Very significant. I see a lot of people who go through the North Node transits in the 7th house, and they end up meeting their future partner, or they end up having a really significant relationship that turns into like a business partnership, or they have a lot more kind of public recognition, because the 7th house and the 10th house, you and Taurus are having very public kind of moments. The challenge here is that the South Node in the 1st house, it kind of knocks the wind out of your sails a little bit. And there can be periods where you feel like you're going through an identity change. You may not feel like yourself, or you're going through your clothes and you're just like, I just want to get rid of it all. It's not me anymore. And you're like shedding old skin. And you'll notice that there can be a lot of physical changes too. And I think you'll definitely see that with Mars and Jupiter going through the 1st house. A lot of you guys are going to want to cut your hair, or you're going to be like, I just want to be out with the old and with the new. You might feel like that is somehow connected to your family in a way, and wanting to move or relocate. It can also be a time where, you're having an incredible glow up, thankfully, with Jupiter going through this sign. So you're going to see the waves of intensity that's going to be happening basically for the better part of like the next year. It's going to be now all the way until next spring. And I would just say, pace yourself. You want to treat this almost like it's going to be a long distance kind of race, not a sprint. And you can burn out overly quickly when Mars and Jupiter is there. And I also just have this image of like a 2-year-old you know, having like a meltdown at Disneyland with like an ice cream, you know, it's just like sugar overload with Jupiter, and Mars is just like, I've had too much stimulation, and then it's just like the tantrum, right? And I say that lovingly, because if you feel like you're not making progress quickly enough, or you're not traveling when you want to travel, Mars, when you're not seeing the change fast enough, when you're not seeing the change with your home or your family, you know, there can be like hot ass emotional meltdowns. And it's hard. I mean, I'm coming out of having 2 years here recently of having like the South Node going through my first house and the North Node going through my 7th house. And what it taught me was that, you know, you can get rid of all of the things. You can change everything about your appearance. You can get rid of all of your clothes. You can do all of that stuff. But there are still things that are residing sometimes within you that you need to work on that is not connected to the outside. And it really pushes you with the North Node going through the 7th house to be diplomatic, to work with another person, to collaborate, you know, to be willing to meet other people halfway. And also sometimes where you have to kind of confront other people too. But I think it's going to be a big turning point for you guys personally, physically. And I think it's going to be also a big kind of destiny change where many of you guys might be finding there are some just really significant changes going on with your relationships. Could be with friends, Aquarius, you know, it could be with family, you know, Pluto is there. And certainly friends play a huge piece of are a big piece of the puzzle, because Uranus is the ruler and it's in the 11th. So your goals around friends, community, and relationships are changing. And maybe there's a pivot towards more platonic relationships than romantic. But some of you guys are also just going to see that, you know, you're needing to pay attention if you're in committed relationships to what's going on with your partners too, as they're going through some pretty profound change with Pluto being in that sign. So good time for a therapist, good time for an astrologer, good time to be trying to see things from other people's perspectives. And you guys are going to have to let me know how it goes. All right, Virgo and Virgo rising, you guys are going to be doing the South Node in Leo in your natal 12th house, the North Node in Aquarius in your natal 6th. Okay, I think where you guys have the upper hand here is that you're like a 6th house character, right? Health, habits, routine, productivity, service, organization, cleanliness, rituals. So I think having the North Node and having Pluto here is going to feel faintly familiar. Now, on the other hand, this is a sign that in conjuncts and quincunxes you. So I really want you guys to pay attention, because I do feel like some of the things that are changing with your schedule, your health, your day-to-day work, your habits, they may feel uncomfortable. And there may be a sense of you having to kind of approach some of these changes in a more unconventional way. Earth signs are very logical. It's very much, you know, matter of fact, point A to point B. This is how we get something done. But Aquarius is kind of like throwing a monkey wrench into your daily routine and being like, rather than doing it yourself, why don't you just use this app or use this software? Or why don't you work out differently? Or maybe consider working in a communal kind of space. Or, hey, have you considered, you know, working, you know, for yourself, or being a contractor, or being independent? And these might be things that kind of like, you know, like I said, throw you for a little bit of a loop. Now, I think that with the 6th and the 12th house, something else that comes up for me a lot is that this is all about health and habits. Where the 6th house is like, are you doing your laundry? Are you working out? Are you eating your vegetables? The 12th house is like, are you smoking your vape too much? You know, are you bed rotting? Are you isolating? You know, are you doing something positive and kind of quality with your alone time? Or are you just kind of hiding out? And you'll see a lot of, and like I kind of was saying to like Leo, I was like, when the South Node goes through your first house, you change yourself. But then when the South Node goes into your 12th house, then you start to see there's a lot of things subconsciously that still need kind of like to be worked out. So you have to watch your mind, body, spirit balance. You know, both your physical and also your emotional health is important, as is your sleep. And the 12th house can be your bedroom. It can be foreign lands, hospitals, healing centers, rehabs. And this is going to really kind of touch on rest, solitude, and your subconscious. So the theme here is going to be about building healthier daily habits, right? By showing up consistently for others, North Node and Aquarius, instead of retreating into isolation or escapism. So what you want to watch for is like shifts in your work routine, your health practices, service-oriented projects. And really, I think as a tip, it's really going to be about structuring your schedule and your daily habits and having consistency, which will feel more nourishing than you expect. And it's really about giving a change to your schedule or your routine a real chance. Now, it's very much work-related for you, or treating your health as if it's your job, which you should be. And that's because Uranus rules your 6th house, and it's currently kind of trining Pluto from your 10th. So this tells me that a lot of you guys are already saying, well, I'm willing to diversify something about my career, work a second job, start a side hustle, do something that's going to be independent. So you're already in like the flow of some of this stuff, and you're starting to see where some of your work is branching out, or maybe you're kind of keeping an open mind about how that can change, which I think is a good thing. And I would just say, look over the storyline of what's been happening over the last year since Uranus has gone in and out of Gemini, because there's a storyline here that's about, well, changing something about your job can allow you to kind of change something about your routine. What the North Node in the sixth house has taught me, especially the last year, has just basically been routines are like rituals. And the more that you do them and you treat them as such, instead of treating them almost as if they're, like nuisances, the more that you start to see things kind of like magically materialize. So maybe starting to go to the gym regularly, or eating differently, or being better organized, or, maintaining a schedule seems like a hassle. Eventually you get into the grind, and then you start to realize like, wow, actually everything is kind of flowing into place. So like I said, you're a little bit more talented in that department. So I think you guys are going to navigate this pretty well. But nevertheless, keep an eye out for developing changes in not just your health, but also your job and your day-to-day routine. Good luck, Virgo. All right, Libras and Libra risings, you guys are going to be experiencing the North Node going into Aquarius in your 5th house, and the South Node going into Leo in your 11th house. Now, this is obviously sextiling you from Leo, which is friendly, trining you from Aquarius, which is friendly. And if you happen to be either a earlier degree Libra, like the first 5 degrees, you're experiencing a grand air trine between Uranus, the ruler, Pluto, and your sign. Or if you're a later degree Libra, sun, moon, or rising, you're going to be experiencing the North Node trining your sun, moon, or rising, which I think is pretty cool. What can I say about this? I mean, and I try to not be biased because, this is my natal North Node placement. So I'm going to try to be as kind of by the book as possible. But essentially, the North Node in the 5th house is activating, and it's making you crave, and it's making you want more of 5th house things. So that means you want to be more creative. You want more spontaneity, maybe when it comes to having fun. You're more open to unconventional romances, dating differently, falling in love, things that are connected to taking risks, things that are connected to maybe gambling or learning about stock or trade. This can also be a really significant time for Libra and Libra risings romantically, or anything that's kind of connected to children. Now, the South Node in Leo is activating your 11th house. And this is the house that deals with friendships. It's about groups. It's about networks. And it's also interesting because Libra, when the world zigs, we zag, right? And a lot of that's just the inverted houses, where typically you would see the North Node in the 5th house, and it would say, well, this is all about you and your creativity and your joy and your playtime and your children. But the South Node, in the 11th house is like, well, we're moving away from what friends want, or there's going to be some changes with friendships, or a shifting of your goals, and like you're, not so concerned with what the audience has to say. There's some truth here. So it's very kind of opposite in terms of what you're going to hear with the stereotypical North Node in Aquarius, South Node in Leo. And I personally think that the North Node Aquarius in the 5th house is generally somebody who creates, and they just give that to the collective. And they're like, here's what I made, and so they don't always get the recognition that they deserve. There can also be a sense of, with the South Node in Leo, just a lot of doing things their own way and not feeling like they're a part of any one particular clique or group. So really what's going to be happening is like you're stepping into your own creative voice and joy, rather than losing yourself entirely to group identity or other people's causes. So what you want to watch for is like personal creative projects. It could be your own business. It could be that you're taking a risk on something that you love doing. It could mean you're learning a new hobby. It could also mean that romance or a shift in how you show up in your friend groups is likely going to happen. I'll tell you guys, like, it's okay to take up space as an individual now. The cycle is inviting you to do so. May that come with some significant changes to your friendships? For sure, you will see that. There will be some people from the past that are going to pepper in when you see the retrogrades in the fall. There are going to be some friendships that you're just going to naturally kind of cut and sever with. And it's also going to be a time where I think a lot of Libras are going to look around and they're going to go, are these people really people I want to associate with? Are they in my corner? Is it potentially good for me to be around some of these people? And is it better for me to kind of interest myself in the things that I really enjoy, love doing, and kind of creating? Now, this is pulling energy from Uranus, and Uranus is in your 9th house, where maybe part of your new interest is I'm traveling a lot, you know, or I'm going back to school. It could mean that your philosophy has somehow shifted about how you look at romance or creativity. Long distance relationships can be a theme here. Anything that's about your digital creations. Like for me, you know, one of them was, I was like, oh, well, I really want to publish something with Uranus and Gemini. And I was like, I'm going to create a tarot deck, you know, and that's literally how it manifested. But now it's shifting a little bit. And like, there's a sense of me kind of being like, well, there's other things I want to do and other things I want to create. And how is teaching and education kind of coming into that, or maybe publishing in like a broader sense? So it's really going to be dependent on what's going on in your chart. I'm just going to say, have fun, be creative. You know, if you're a Libra rising who's been looking for love, it's a great time. Take those risks, take those chances, certainly learn about some of the things that you're going to be doing. So if it's trading, if it's publishing, if it's going to be anything connected to working with children or creative work, whether you're finding a mentor or you're becoming one, that might be a big piece of the puzzle. And I think a lot of my Libra risings are potentially going to be having babies. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that manifests for you guys throughout the better part of the next 2 years. Good luck, Libra. Let me know what happens. All right, we've got Scorpio and Scorpio rising. What's up, Scorpio? You're like, what more? Actually, this is actually a pretty cool transit for you guys. It's going to be interesting because similar to Taurus, there's a little bit of like balancing two opposing forces in your life. You're going to see the North Node is going to be moving into Aquarius in your natal 4th house, while the South Node is going to be moving into Leo in your natal 10th house. 4th house is roots, home, family, living situation, and your private life, while the 10th house is your public life, your reputation, your career, and your status. Similar to what I said for Taurus, you are going to be experiencing the North and the South nodes squaring you. So if you're a Scorpio or Scorpio rising, I would say, 20 to about 29 degrees, the nodes will be squaring you this year. And I want to actually focus on that first. The nodal square is going to talk about where there may be a need to change and transform. Okay, so the first house could mean your style changes, your body changes, the way that you present yourself changes. Usually with Aquarius, with Scorpio rising, you guys are very private people. You maybe really like wearing your, dark leather and things that are going to be a little bit more kind of, I don't know, Scorpio like plutonic, right? There is a sense of you maybe being reluctant to want to change or to be seen in some way or to be in the spotlight, which is ironic because you have, Leo on the midheaven. Anyway, your body, your physical appearance, something about how you approach change and transformation is 100% going to come up, and how you are dealing with some of those changes revolving around your home and also your career. Now, the North Node going into your 4th house, you've already had a little bit of an experience here. You've had an eclipse here in February. You've been seeing Pluto, your ruler, retrograde through this part of your chart where you're kind of reassessing the changes at home, changes with parents, living situation, sometimes family drama or family crisis. And Pluto's been in a trine to Uranus, which rules the North Node. So some of these physical, home, or emotional changes are also bringing about a lot of psychological changes, changes in resources, changes in intimacy. And there's been a lot of endings and a lot of beginnings with both Pluto in your 4th and Uranus in your 8th. Now, what you guys are going to find is that, the South Node is activating your 10th house. And this is going to be about your career, your reputation. And some may say when the South Node goes into the 10th house and the North Node goes into the 4th house, there is not as much focus on your career, your reputation, or your status. Okay, some of you guys might go, I'm retiring, I want to stay, at home, I want to spend time, with my spouse, or, I want to relocate, I don't want to be leading a company, I don't want to be working anymore, right? And others are going to be feeling like it's actually more about going, I've got work, it's great, but it's kind of on autopilot and I'm doing something. And maybe with Jupiter going through your 10th house, your guys' career advancement is wonderful and it comes with ease. Some of you guys might find that you're making more money this year. It just happens naturally. A lot of the hard work and the dedication that you've put in, right, South Node in Leo, is now starting to materialize, is like coming out on top. But the balance between what you're doing out in the world and your visibility versus what you're doing at home, it feels a little extreme. And I think that this is going to be a 2-year period where you have to really prioritize what's going on in the home front. Prioritizing emotional roots and home life over public achievement and your career status is going to be big. Watching for things like a move, family development, a reevaluation of what success actually means to you. And this is going to be, I think, really letting your sense of accomplishment come from internal peace, not external recognition, for the better part of the next 2 years. Now, here's where things are interesting, and they're kind of like paradoxical in a way. You know, we're going to be seeing all year long that Jupiter is going to be going through your 10th house. So I do think a lot of my Scorpio and Scorpio risings are going to have career success. They're finally going to have like a breakthrough moment, more money, new job. But Jupiter is also connected to the 5th house. So it could mean some of you guys become parents, and that's part of the rearrangement of what's kind of going on at home. It could also mean that you're more focusing on your creative kind of work, or maybe there's something connected to your children that you feel like you need to kind of step in for. And then on the other hand, you will see Jupiter and Mars, your planetary ruler, hit the South Node several times. So this could mean that there are big periods where things are ramping up at work and then they slow down, or there could be several breaks and changes with your work schedule, where you change jobs. There could be layoffs. There could be, you know, periods where you're not as busy. And that's going to be trying to get your attention to kind of drive your energy more into your 4th house. So there isn't as much consistency that can kind of come from your work as well. And you can kind of, you know, kind of burn yourself out. So you have to, you know, kind of practice patience. The other thing that I think about for you guys is that eventually down the road, you're going to be seeing in 2 years' time, the North Node is going to hit Pluto. So eventually you're going to have that complete transformation of your home life, your family life, that big move, that big relocation, you know, something that's going to come. And I think a lot of you guys know that that's coming, and maybe you're just kind of saying, just give me another 2 years, you know, and then I'll retire, or let me put in a little bit more work, and then I'm going to, you know, finally take time off and, you know, have kids, or, you know, raise a family, whatever, or get married. Some of those can be the things. And if I were a Scorpio rising and I'm a Scorpio sun, I'd be leaning into Pluto trine Uranus, because I think that the more that you're open to change and transform or rethink where you're living now, it can actually really make it a little bit easier, either emotionally or financially. And I think a lot of you guys are just going to realize you don't have to work so hard. If you're investing your resources, you're kind of doing something with your money with a partner. Maybe you're diversifying something about where you're living, or you're investing in like land or property, you know, with a friend or with family. That would make it a little bit easier on your work schedule, so you don't feel like you have to do too much. And like I said, some of you guys will go into your career and you'll feel like you're on autopilot, but watch some of the videos that I'm going to put in the future about the Mars and the Jupiter and the South Node, and keep an eye on mid-November, because that's going to be the first period where you might be like, I need to kind of take a step back. But be open to, I think, unconventional ways of living, right? North Node in Aquarius is like, you know, do you want to go and buy a property with your friends or your family, you know, and go and live in a more rural area? Is it time for you to really start thinking about like where your life trajectory is going? And I think a Scorpio rising should, just knowing that Pluto is going to be in this sign for the better part of the next 20 years. Where do you see yourself 20 years from now? What do you want? And how do you start laying the foundation and the groundwork for that right now to make that process easier to get into literally in about 2 years' time? So Scorpio, let me know how it goes. Very interesting time for you guys. All right, for Sag and Sag rising, you guys are going to see the North Node in Aquarius in your natal 3rd house and the South Node in Leo in your natal 9th. Good news is the South Node is trining you by sign, so it's friendly. You're actually going to see some fire trines from Sag to Leo to Aries, so I think it's going to light your guys' chart up in the best ways, especially for creativity, self-expression, children, having fun, traveling, learning, all that stuff. And Aquarius is going to be sextiling you from your 3rd to your 1st, really kind of broadening how you communicate, how you learn, and also your mindset. Now, for Sag risings, this is going to be activating with the North Node in the 3rd house, communication, learning, local community. Some of you guys are going to start reading more frequently. You're going to be learning more frequently. You might get new vehicles. There might be much more of an emphasis on your relationship with your siblings, your neighbors, writing, podcasting, anything that's connected to media. While the South Node is going to be activating your 9th house, and this is connected to higher philosophy, travel, and big beliefs. Interestingly enough, this is a house that's very much associated with you, because that is kind of the topics that you like: culture, foreign places, traveling, learning, you know, your philosophy. And Jupiter, your chart ruler, is moving through there this year. So some of my Sag risings are definitely going to get a chance to travel, but I'm going to tell you, unfortunately, not the entire cycle is going to be about that. And it's actually going to probably be very obvious to you, especially in the fall, when Jupiter and Mars are coming into conjunction, that you're like, okay, maybe, you know, I thought I was going on a trip and it's falling apart. Or, you know, maybe I thought I wanted to go back to college, but I'm not so sure. Or, you know, I might be taking time away from, you know, going to school, and I'm breaking away from that. Because it's less about the foreign trips. It's less about the mentorship, the writing, the publishing. It's going to be less about what you believe. It's more about how there is this new information, new knowledge, and new belief system that's being formed in your third house. And what's going to happen is you're going to see that this is a time where grounding your big picture beliefs into everyday communication and connection with people around you is much more important. So this is going to be a time where you really want to watch, because there's going to be writing, teaching, or local community projects that may gain some momentum. I would say as a tip, your neighborhood or your immediate circles are going to matter just as much as your kind of grand life philosophy and plans. Now, usually with the North Node in the third house, there is like a sense of us journaling more and asking questions more, being curious, listening to podcasts, writing, and I would do those things. And I would also lean into the fact that Uranus is the ruler in the 7th. So a lot of my Sag and Sag risings are really going to benefit from being like, oh, how can a shift in my mental, perspective, or how I communicate, maybe help me navigate the turbulence in my marriage, right? Uranus in the 7th house. How can I learn to change and transform the way that I deal with siblings, and maybe, confront siblings? And for some of you guys, it's being like, I can't deal with them in person, but I'm just going to send them a letter. That's very Aquarius, or I'm going to send them an email. Others might feel like it's a good time for talk therapy, and that's going to help them kind of balance out the energy of Pluto, which has recently been opposing Jupiter. So there's been a lot of stress in how you're communicating, or there's been a lot of shifts maybe in legal matters, or maybe some tension with family relationships, or tension revolving around, travel or relocation. And I think that for a lot of you guys, if you are really leaning into the Pluto trine Uranus, it's going to soften Uranus in opposition to your sign. And then also, if you look at Pluto, it's been in opposition to Jupiter. So Sag risings have actually been dealing with a lot of opposition here recently. And now with Aquarius North Node coming in, it's saying, look, Sag, something's got to change about your mindset. It can't be that you're kind of silently beating yourself up about something, because Pluto rules the 12th, and not talking about what bothers you. Write it out, go for walks, practice breathwork exercises, get comfortable with asking questions, having debates, conversations. And I think that, a lot of you guys are just going to be restructuring a lot of what your belief systems are. Like, for example, like with Mars and Jupiter in the South Node, what you guys will probably find throughout the next year with those transits is what you went to school for may not ultimately be your personal philosophy anymore, and you may be adopting, I'm going to teach myself, I might have gone to school for, a bachelor's in science, but, now I'm having to teach myself coding, that kind of stuff. And working more with like websites, or learning more about media and all of the ways that you can transform the way that you communicate and connect, and also connect with other people, what services you offer, and telling them what you do, or telling them what your interests are, or how you can kind of provide services, can definitely really supercharge, I think, Uranus going through your 7th house. So opt for the long road trip rather than getting on the flight and going to a foreign country. Go and explore your local communities, and go and explore the state that you live in, or maybe the part of the country that you live in, versus feeling like you have to, flee and go to the other side of the world. And get comfortable with asking questions, breath work, and I would also say journaling and walking. All of these things would be really wonderful as you go through these transits. Going for drives also can be something else that's really calming for the mind. All right, Sag, I hope you guys like this one. Let me know what happens. Capricorn and Capricorn rising. You guys are going to have North Node going through your 2nd house of Aquarius, South Node going through your 8th house of Leo. Very financial houses for you in Cancer. And something I always think about when the North Node goes through the 2nd house is like, she's going to work hard for the money. That's kind of the vibe that I get, because the North Node is about wanting more. It's about craving more. And basically being like, I need to learn how to do this thing. And so the 2nd house is going to be money, self-worth, resources, spending habits, while the 8th house, where the South Node is going to be kind of activating your shared resources, intimacy, transformation, other people's support. And maybe you guys have heard me recently say the quote from Baz Luhrmann when he said, it doesn't matter if you have a wealthy spouse or inheritance, you never know when either one of those things might like run out. Like, that's what I think about for you guys over this next year. Just due to the nature of like the South Node hitting, with Mars and Jupiter, where, yes, for some of you guys, if you've been waiting for big payouts, if you've been waiting for a big settlement, if you've been expecting, an inheritance, sure, it could definitely come out, but it could be drug out a little bit. And there could definitely be a sense of going back and forth. That's due to the nature of the North Node and now Pluto being in your second house, which means now you're more focused on your resources and kind of untangling yourself from other people. Whether that's, your debt or credit cards or partner's money, maybe it has something to do with your savings and, bills that are due versus the second house. That's like, okay, what am I actually earning and what can I hold on to? So for you guys, a lot of this is going to be about building your own independent financial security and also self-worth rather than relying on merging resources or intense entanglements with others. What you want to watch for is new income streams, and especially ones that are kind of tied to your own skills or maybe your brand. And I would say, as a tip, your worth isn't determined by anyone else's investment in you. You have to build this from the ground up. Now, what's interesting is Pluto has already been here for some time. So you already have a little bit of a taste of what is to come with some of your, major, financial kind of developments. And the North Node is a period where generally we see more. Granted, like I said, you have to work for it. Now, this is picking up the energy of Uranus in your sixth, which means you're willing to maybe work more than one job or go independent, work remotely, maybe diversify something about, what you're doing and your productivity. And that may also be part of the freedom. Aquarius is freedom, the second house is finances. So financial freedom. What does it mean to have that? And where do you have to diversify something about your work, your schedule, or your resources in order to have that? At some point down the road, and it's 2 years from now, you're going to see the North Node and Pluto in conjunction in your second house. And there's definitely going to be some big financial reckoning. Whether that's good or bad is really up to you. And that's why I tell you this now. I think that Capricorn risings, more than any of the other signs, are really going to be probably the most interested in the future of cryptocurrency, diversification with assets, digital assets, anything that's going to be connected to that stuff. And I think right now it's about like learning, which workforces are potentially going to be impacted the most by AI. I would start there. Is it your job? Because if so, it might mean that within 2 years' time, you're kind of staring down the barrel of a pretty difficult financial situation. But you can get ahead of it. You can also decide to work with it and integrate that into your business so you could be more productive. You can have, more free time. Maybe you can work, more than one job. Also, it could mean that you're investing your resources into the industries which AI is actually going to be supporting and improving. And that could be part of the regeneration and the power that comes from, Pluto and the North Node being in your second house. Anyway, I think that, it's going to be interesting to see. I would say this to both Cancer and also Capricorn, is just be smart with your money this year. Most of your entanglements is going to be with what you're owed, and whether that's a divorce settlement or if there's going to be an inheritance, or whether or not you're dealing with like a insurance, related matter. And you're definitely going to see that happening starting in the fall. And I think it's going to be like family squabbles and drama over who gets the house, or, who's controlling the estate, or whether or not, an insurance company is going to pay for something kind of connected to your home. It could be some of those things too. And with the North Node and Pluto being there, you're a lot more protective over, what you pay for. And it's not that you're not willing to pay for it. It's more that you're just like, well, why do I have to pay for it? Jupiter's the truth. So with Jupiter and Mars being along the South Node this year, you're going to be like, look, we have a contractual agreement that if we get divorced, you're going to pay me X, Y, and Z, or you owe me X, Y, and Z. Or if you're going back and forth with an insurance company, it's going to basically be like you going, well, if you see this document here that we signed, this is what you agreed to. So a lot of it's going to be about going back and forth with what you're owed. And I would say, heavy lies the crown with the North Node and Pluto in the second house. It's a lot of, for some established Capricorn risings, you may have the money, but you might be like, well, why is it my job, my responsibility to kind of bankroll other people? I've worked hard to get to the point that I'm at, and I want to enjoy nice things. So pay attention to the balance between your resources and others. Lean into the diversification in your daily routines and your habits. And it's a good time to start looking at new ways to be able to kind of, innovate your and differentiate some of your investments. I think I would definitely start there. All right, good luck to my Capricorns. Aquarius. Oh, an Aquarius rising. You guys are going to see the North Node going into your sign. And you're going to see the South Node going into your seventh house, your opposite sign of Leo. And very paradoxical for you guys. Fun, nevertheless. But as you see like the North Node going into your first house, this is all about yourself. This is about your identity. This is about your personal path. How you look, how you're unconventional, how you're independent, how your body feels, what your needs are. Do yourself a favor. Go and get a Pisces rising friend. They're going to tell you all about it. They're going to tell you how they've been more self-focused, more in touch with their body, and some of the changes, the shifts, and the releasing that they've had to go through with others, okay? Now, what I like about this is that with the North Node being in your first house, like you can fly your freak flag now more than ever. And especially if you're an Aquarius rising, you want to wear weird stuff. You want to be unconventional. You want to wear things that are like modern and different, kind of funky. By all means, do it. A lot of that's picking up the energy from Uranus, obviously the dispositor, which is in your fifth, where it's like now you can kind of be this alter ego, right? You can wear the costume. You can be the actor or the actress in your own life, like main kind of character energy. I also think with Pluto being there in a trine to Uranus, you're going through a pretty significant transformative period where you're shedding and you're releasing old aspects of yourself. And it's also probably helping you have creative breakthroughs, romantic breakthroughs, and maybe part of you being more in touch with your first house is for creative processes or for the purpose of, you know, having sex. I mean, you know, for fun. This is very much the fifth house, feeling yourself. Maybe pregnancy, that could be another one, that your body is changing because there is some kind of dramatic change that's happening, you know, in your fifth house. There's a number of ways this can kind of play out, but working with your inner child, being creative, having fun, I think you guys are going to love this. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got the South Node that's moving through Leo, which is inherently about releasing old ego issues and conflicts that are connected to relationships. So where the North Node is all about you, the South Node in the seventh house is going to be, well, how's that impacting my relationships? How's that impacting my partners, right? My spouses, my clients, my business partners, my relationship with my children even, South Node in the seventh house. And this is almost like, in a way, you stepping into your own authentic identity and path, even if that means that you have to kind of like loosen your grip on a partnership or maybe a defined sense of self. And what you want to watch for is that there could be some major personal reinvention, like a new look or a bold kind of solo adventure. And my tip for you is like, this is your permission slip to prioritize your own growth without guilt. Now, with that being said, it's all about what makes you happy, what brings you joy, you know, what you truly love, what lights you up. And you have to watch for those intermittent periods where you may see that old characters from the past come back. Now, this could be karmic relationships, people who you feel like you've met before, people who you've definitely dealt with in this lifetime, you know, who you've dated, been married to, kind of partnered with, or created in some way with. And you will see Jupiter going through your seventh house, meeting the South Node, and also Mars. So I do think there's going to be a lot of like, you know, partners saying to you, well, what about me? You know, I don't feel heard, or I don't feel like you're choosing me. And on the other end of the spectrum, you could have Jupiter kind of being like the cheerleader, where you have positive, joyful, creative, you know, people who are going to be very kind of preachy or spiritual or religious, you know, that are kind of coming into your life. Meeting foreigners, meeting people who are lawyers, teachers, that kind of stuff is pretty common. Relationships that you have maybe with your lawyer or an advisor or a therapist or an astrologer even could be very important to kind of give you perspective this year. And yeah, you're definitely going to see some people from the past that are going to be coming back. It'll happen in October, and then you're going to see it happen again next spring into summer. And several periods where you may be feeling like you have to detach from certain relationships, where you're feeling like you're outgrowing some of those relationships, or it's not necessarily working, or you're watching your partners kind of go through their own like ego issues. Go and listen to Leo rising, you know, for example. You'll see that they need to learn how to partner. They need to, you know, be willing to kind of evolve and grow up and kind of shed some of those old layers of where they can kind of emotionally erupt, so that way they can kind of better partner with other people. For you, it's going to be like you going like, I can keep certain people around, but only if it makes me happy, or only if it's leading to, you know, real joy and evolution or creative purpose. Otherwise, you'll see periods where you're going to kind of, you know, like I said, shake a couple people loose. So strong relationships can go through the South Node transit. If you've been married for some time, you may look back at those periods and go, yeah, we were going through a rough patch, but, you know, we got through it. And you're just probably going to have to be a little bit more firm, both because Saturn is in your third house of your mindset and how you communicate, but also Uranus is saying that, you know, you're more feeling like you need spontaneity in your creative process or in your love life. And whether it's changing something about your creative collaborations or changing something about your committed relationships, there can definitely be a little bit more freedom needed in the relationship department. So very interesting for you, Aquarius and Aquarius risings. You guys will have to let me know what goes on. I think you're also one of the signs that's going to start having babies because you have your chart ruler in the fifth house and because you're having eclipses in your first house. So that can be another big kind of evolutionary kind of shift. Your relationship to children, relationship to your child, or having children as these eclipses are happening in your sign. So very exciting for you guys. And then finally, we got Pisces and Pisces risings, where you guys will see the North Node in Aquarius in your 12th house and the South Node in Leo in your 6th. And I'll say some of the same things I said to you and Virgo. With these houses, these are very much about health and habits and routine. And sometimes with the 6th and 12th houses, these are kind of like no man's land. Like sometimes there can be stuff that happens that completely catches us off guard. And that's because these houses do not make a direct aspect to the ascendant. So we likely don't see the self-sabotage. We also don't always see the health issues, the job issues, those things kind of coming. So I just want to preface it by saying that. Now, what's interesting is that Jupiter, which is your traditional ruler, is going to be moving through the same sign as the South Node. So naturally your energy, your attention is going to be pulled towards the 6th house, which is going to be, okay, you know, what are old outdated ways of working, of being of service, of overextending myself, of overworking, you know, or what habits need to go, or what needs to change with my schedule, my office, or just my daily life, okay? And then on the other end of the spectrum, you know, you're going to see with the North Node being in your 12th house that this is going to be about you taking time to tap into 12th house energy, which being a Pisces or a Pisces rising, you can do naturally. You know how to go and meditate. You know how to just kind of, you know, poof and disappear into the ethers for a little bit. You know sometimes how to self-sabotage, but you also know when it's time to get some space and to retreat a little bit and to kind of like reflect. And whether that's to heal or whether that's to, you know, meditate or to kind of tap into your intuition. These two houses are interesting because that North Node in the 12th house, at least from what I've seen with some of my clients, they need more rest, right? And they feel like they need to tap more into what's going on in the ethers and the unseen. They become very spiritual. Sometimes they'll travel to foreign lands. Sometimes they get very involved in meditation, esoteric topics, you know, spiritual ritual. And then when you see the South Node going through the 6th house, we can release old habits. And maybe it's because we're reflecting more, or we're working with a hypnotherapist, or we're more aware of our self-sabotage, and we go, this is why I do that. Okay, now I'm going to stop doing it. But we can also feel like with the South Node in the 6th, old health problems are cropping up. Maybe there's a lot of changes with our schedule. Maybe there is a need to kind of break away from old ways of working, like I said. And really this is about making space for rest, reflection, and spiritual connection, instead of over-identifying with busyness and constant kind of productivity. So what you want to watch for is that there's going to be a pull towards meditation, therapy, dream work, you know, quietly stepping back from overcommitment. And the theme is also going to be that not all growth happens through doing. Some of it happens through surrender and through, you know, and through like self-reflection. And I think that's especially true for you over the next 2 years. You'll see this year it's going to be more where if you're overextending yourself, you're going to see the effects of it. And you guys will see if you're working too much, doing too much, you know, you're like, oh my God, I go through like 12 hours of needing to sleep and like can't get out of bed. And that's where you start to see the imbalance of the 6th and the 12th house. Now it's also picking up the energy, the North Node of Uranus, which is in your 4th, which means that a lot of this is like subconscious reprogramming tied to your emotional habits, family karma, you know, where there's some moves where, you know, you switch apartments, or maybe you move to another city, or there's some drastic kind of shakeup that happens at home or with your family, and like the subconscious kind of effects. Something that this reminds me of is like, you know, I come from like a background of having like, you know, people who I've worked with and friends that are involved in like the paranormal world. And I've seen a lot of cases where people will go in and they will start renovating a house, or maybe a house has been abandoned for a very long time. And then a family moves in and they, you know, start bringing in their furniture and they're living there. And now the house has been disrupted, right? And so now that the house is disrupted, now they're, you know, they're hearing things, they're seeing things, there's like apparitions and stuff that's kind of going on because the spirits have been, well, woken up. That's kind of the feeling that I get looking at your chart. You know, you might feel like there are some things that might change, and it can be as simple as rearranging furniture, going through an attic, cleaning out a basement, and the subconscious psychological effects where you're going down memory lane, or you're having this really strong kind of periods of feeling very reminiscent, or thinking about the past and kind of getting stuck in the past, while simultaneously also you're picking up on the future. So there may be really strong dreams or intuitive hits about what's going to happen with your house or your home, with your family, is if you feel like there's an earthquake coming, literally or figuratively, or if you feel like there's a move coming or a relocation that could mean that you're picking up and you're going to a place that's going to be foreign or isolating, private. So those might be some things that start kind of panning out for you guys. Really recommend to be doing some research into your family lineage because the 4th house is roots and the 12th house is understanding your ancestors. And whether that means you're talking to family, you're reading old, family notebooks, you're looking at photos, maybe you're doing some, like ancestry kind of like research. There may be some things that you uncover that are quite surprising to you, and it also will help you have a better understanding of who you are, where you come from, and also watch for some of the contact that you can have from ancestors. Like I have Uranus in my 4th house, and I remember the last time the North Node went through my 12th house, I had all these like weird dreams, and I remember going to psychics, and like, this one psychic in particular kept talking to me being like, oh yeah, your great grandmother, like Anna, she comes around, your apartment. And I was like, there is no fucking way that this person would have known that. And like knew a bunch of stuff about like my great grandmother who was like Romanian, who was ironically hanging around my house. So watch for some of those dreams or some of those like subconscious like downloads that you're getting, because there is some kind of connection to, well, people who are kind of beyond the veil. So hope you guys enjoy that, Pisces. All right, well guys, that was a long one. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I wanted to make sure that it was like really thorough, and I'm sure at some point we're gonna do a little bit of like a check-in, so we'll probably talk about some of these aspects that we covered down the road. But that's really the full picture of the North Node going into Aquarius, the South Node going into Leo, this nodal shift that we're gonna be experiencing this week, and a story about kind of trading the need to be seen for the need to belong, and the need to belong, for finding out that our individual light is actually getting brighter, and when we share it with something bigger than ourselves, that's where the magic happens. If this video resonated with you, if you liked it, please do give me a thumbs up and consider sharing on your socials. Make sure you guys are subscribed so you don't miss some of the other deep dives that we're going to be doing on all of the transits that are going to be a part of this video and some of the other videos. We also have the August horoscopes out. If you haven't already seen those, definitely check them out. And don't forget to drop me a comment, leave me your rising sign. Let me know, are you having your nodal return? Is it a nodal square, a reversal? Are you guys feeling the heat if you're a fixed sign? And do you remember what events were happening the last time we had this 18.5 years ago? I'd love to hear your guys' stories. And until next time, obviously, enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy this nodal shift. Catch me here tomorrow. I'll be here at 6:00 p.m. Pacific time. That's 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Check the community tabs. I'm going to be posting the links for the full moon in Aquarius live astrology readings that I'm doing. If you guys want to come get a reading, come get a reading about this, and you can kind of see where this is the gateway to this nodal shift for you. Click the links in the description. Head over to beyondtheveiltarot.com to see more about me and my work, my courses, my transit calendars, and much more at beyondtheveiltarot.com. See you here tomorrow. Enjoy this shift. You guys take care.